Chapter 41. Urgent matters, ah. Don't blame this girl if it's urgent. Just what's going on? Grand concubine Yi feigned shock. The empress only pretended not to hear as she continued to lecture Princess Changping. Since Qin Wangfei went out with the Duke of Qin, then you should find your imperial father and have him find him. It can't be that your imperial father can't find him either. As the empress spoke, she gave Grand concubine Yi a meaningful look. Grand imperial concubine, don't you think so? One was using the Duke of Qin to threaten, while the other was using the emperor to pressure others. Hearing this, everyone's hearts raced. Princess Changping, on the other hand, felt enlightened and surprised. Right. I'll go find imperial father. This time, he'll definitely help me. Grand concubine Yi understood the empress's personality. With her status, she'd never speak impulsively. If she dared to bring up the emperor today, then it meant that Princess Changping's matters were serious. At the very least, she was confident that she could get the emperor to show his face. Muhu, let's go. We'll find imperial father right away. Princess Changping was very agitated as she tugged at the empress to leave. Now Grand concubine Yi was anxious. If this was any other time, she wouldn't care so much. She'd just find an excuse to hand over Han Yunqing. But right now, Han Yunqing was locked up in the woodshed and about to starve to death. If news of this spread and her family's dirty linen was out in the open, where would she put her face? Grand concubine Yi was about to speak when Murong Wanru spoke up. Esteemed Empress, Princess Changping, wait a moment. The Empress had long expected this and pulled Princess Changping to a stop. She always did her best to avoid bothering the Emperor with matters of the imperial harem. This was one of the biggest reasons why she was favored. Murong Wanru quickly stepped forward and bowed. Esteemed Empress, Princess Changping, Qin Wangfei actually came back last night. But Mu Fei just came back from the estate today and wasn't clear on the details. I didn't report in time, it's all my fault. With Murong Wanru giving her a way out, Grand concubine Yi felt less awkward. She came back. Why didn't you say so earlier? Princess Changping had urgent matters. What if she was delayed? Daughter was negligent. Murong Wanru lowered her head, her face full of guilt. Grand concubine Yi didn't give the Empress or Princess Changping a chance to speak, but hastened to say, Empress, Changping, have a seat. I'll go find her myself. Princess Changping was unwilling, but the Empress signaled her to shut up with a look. Then I'll have to trouble Imperial Concubine Dowager. Grand concubine Yi turned back with a slight smile, but when she walked out with Murong Wanru, her entire face looked like it had been soaked in water. It was both ugly and terrifying. If Murong Wanru hadn't been there just now, she wouldn't even have had a way out of this embarrassing situation. Just what's going on? Grand concubine Yi raged as she walked. Mother, why do I feel that sister-in-law knows? If possible, she'd rather have the Empress and Princess Changping go find the Emperor. That way, she'd have time to make her move. But this way, the news of Han Yunqing's death would blow up. Then she'd be the one who'd have trouble sleeping and eating. Soon enough, they reached the woodshed. Han Yunqing only had one last breath left. She was very, very tired, her eyelids so heavy that they were about to fall off. But she kept them open from beginning to end, staring at the door. She was waiting, not only for her chance to live, but for her chance to strike back at the White Lotus Murong Wanru. As soon as she saw Grand concubine Yi and Murong Wanru appear in the doorway, her pale lips rose into a smile before she slowly shut her eyes. Seeing this, Grand concubine Yi and Murong Wanru were both frightened. Someone come. Someone come. Summon the imperial physicians, quick. Grand concubine Yi cried. At this critical juncture, nothing could happen to Han Yunqing. Murong Wanru was so sullen that she had no choice but to help Han Yunqing up and pinch her philtrum acupuncture point to make her drink warm water. Soon enough, the Duke of Qin's personal imperial physician, Li, hurried back. Seeing the scene and taking her pulse, he knew she was weak from hunger. He quickly took out some pills and had Murong Wanru feed Han Yunqing, then pressed on various acupuncture points on her hand. After a round of emergency treatment, they finally managed to wake her up. Grand Concubine Yi exhaled in relief. She was going to punish Han Yunqing, but ended up with emergency treatment instead. Meanwhile, Murong Wanru's heart felt so stifled that she couldn't pretend to care. All she could do was remain silent. Han Yunqing's face was blank, but her eyes hid a shrewd light. Actually, she hadn't fainted, but had been watching them while they were trying to save her. Seeing her wake up, Imperial Physician Li quickly had Murong Wanru feed Han Yunqing some more sugar water. After a while, Han Yunqing finally recovered some strength. Grand Concubine Yi's heart finally settled as she asked, Han Yunqing, just what did Changping find you for? Han Yunqing shook her head as if she didn't have the strength to speak. Grand Concubine Yi was angry, but it wasn't good for her to lose her temper. She could only endure. Then can you see her now? Han Yunqing was so weak that she didn't even shake her head. Instead, she looked towards Imperial Physician Li. Imperial Physician Li was in a difficult position. Esteemed Imperial Concubine, if it's not urgent, then it's better to let esteemed Wang Fei rest and boil some millet porridge to eat. Urgent! Grand Concubine Yi shouted. No matter what method you use, make her regain her energy immediately. Esteemed Imperial Concubine, this official's abilities are limited. Imperial Physician Li was frightened. Lady Mother, how about I help sister-in-law to my room to lie down first, and then tell Her Majesty the Empress that sister-in-law caught a cold and fell ill. Let them condescend to come to my place. Murong Wanru suggested. Grand Concubine Yi could only agree. Hurry and take her there. Hurry, don't expose any flaws. Grand Concubine Yi was about to turn around when she shot Han Yunqing a warning look before leaving in a hurry. Sister-in-law, you've suffered these past few days. Come to my place. Murong Wanru's eyes flashed with calculations as a page boy carried Han Yunqing away. Murong Wanru lived in the orchid enclosure, a small garden-style courtyard near Grand Concubine Yi's peony courtyard. She didn't take Han Yunqing to her bedroom, but arranged for her to stay in an empty side room in the courtyard. Han Yunqing was placed on the bed, and as soon as the curtains were lowered, the Empress and Princess Changping arrived. Han Yunqing made to rise in greeting, but the Empress quickly stopped her. She sat by the bed and took Han Yunqing's hand. You're excused. How could a small cold make her so ill? I think this body needs to be nourished. Many thanks, esteemed Empress, for your concern, Han Yunqing replied weakly. Princess Changping stood on one side, unable to resist calling out for her imperial aunt, but her tone was commanding. Imperial Aunt Qin, I have urgent matters. Hurry and come with me to the palace. Han Yunqing saw Grand Concubine Yi standing on one side with a gloomy expression. She looked very sullen. She didn't know why Grand Concubine Yi had been angered by this mother and son pair, but she knew her chance to turn things around had come. That ice-cold Duke of Qin was only here to repay a debt of gratitude. He wouldn't be able to protect her all the time. If she was destined to be unable to leave this residence, then all the more reason she should work hard to obtain the approval of this high and mighty mistress. And now, it was an extremely good opportunity. Han Yunqing didn't reply to Princess Changping, but looked docilely towards Grand Concubine Yi. Her meaning was that Grand Concubine Yi had to make the decision. At this moment, Princess Changping began to feel her face itch again. In her panic, she couldn't care less as she begged, Grand Concubine Yi, just agree. Let Imperial Aunt come with me to the palace. I promise I'll bring her back safe and sound. If this was any other day, the Empress wouldn't let Princess Changping beg Grand Concubine Yi like this. But seeing Princess Changping so anxious, she knew her itch had flared up again. Without a choice, the Empress could only coax, Grand Concubine Yi, children's private matters should be left to them. Grand Concubine Yi assumed that Han Yunqing would use this chance to show off and throw her a look. Who knew this little wife would give her face and let her make the decision? In an instant, Grand Concubine Yi didn't feel so sullen anymore. Instead, she felt like the Empress and Princess Changping were here to beg her. She glanced at Han Yunqing, feeling smug in her heart. She wouldn't let the Empress and Princess Changping off so easily if she had the chance. Yunxi, cough, cough, look at how sick your bones are. If you catch a gust of wind on the way to the palace and get worse, how will Mu Fei explain things to the Duke of Qin? He'll blame me as your mother-in-law for not taking good care of you. When did Grand Concubine Yi learn to care for her daughter-in-law? Hearing this, the Empress's face turned gloomy. Grand Concubine Yi was clearly using this chance to bully her. The intelligent Han Yunqing could tell what Grand Concubine Yi was thinking. She hastened to say, Mu Fei must be joking. Qinxia knows His Highness's temper. He only listens to you and the Emperor. He doesn't even have the time to show filial piety to you, so how could he blame you? Qinxia will remember Mu Fei's concern in her heart. TSK, listen to how impressive Han Yunqing's words were. She was comparing Grand Concubine Yi to the Emperor in front of the Empress. She wasn't disrespecting the Emperor, but flattering Grand Concubine Yi as well. Han Yunqing had no idea that the Empress had just used the Emperor to threaten Grand Concubine Yi, but it had to be said that her words had sweetened Grand Concubine Yi's heart. They surpassed Murong Wanru's usual 100 sentences. On one side, Murong Wanru was flustered as she listened. What did Han Yunqing want to do? The Empress was so angry that she pursed her lips, unable to speak. Princess Changping didn't have time to listen to their tit-for-tat. Her words carried hidden meanings, and the itch on her face was unbearable. Grand Concubine Yi, if her illness gets worse, I'll take responsibility. Just let her come with me to the palace. Princess Changping was choked with sobs. But Grand Concubine Yi was slow and sluggish. She looked at Han Yunqing and sighed softly. Muhu. Princess Changping really cried as she tugged at the Empress's hand. Muhu, help me persuade her, quick. The Empress's chest was about to explode, but she had no choice but to speak up. Grand Concubine Yi, Changping really has urgent matters. We've prepared a carriage right outside the door to guarantee that Yunxi's illness won't worsen. When we get to the palace, Imperial Physician Gu will be there too. Isn't it just right for him to take a look at Yunxi? Just let Yunxi go with them. It had to be said that Grand Concubine Yi really wasn't a kind soul. The Empress was already like this, but she still looked hesitant. Finally, Princess Changping burst into tears. Grand Concubine Yi, I'm begging you. I'm begging you. Very good, Grand Concubine Yi had been waiting for the word, beg. Only then did she nod. Yunxi, just go with the Empress to the palace. Han Yunqing nodded obediently. The Empress immediately sent people to carry Han Yunqing out in a sedan chair. Before she got on, Grand Concubine Yi shot Han Yunqing a look, but Han Yunqing pretended not to see. She held the ginseng slice in her mouth as she thought, Grand Concubine Yi, Murong Wanru, just wait for me to come back. Chapter 42. As soon as the carriage left the Duke of Qin's estate, it stopped. The poison on Princess Changping's face had already flared up and was currently itching unbearably. As long as she left the estate, she would be fine. Even if she was by the roadside, she couldn't care less. With a lantern in one hand and a skirt in the other, she hurriedly entered Han Yunqing's carriage. Han Yunqing was currently dozing off. Seeing her enter, she subconsciously reached out to block the dazzling light. Your Highness, you. Before she could finish speaking, Princess Changping suddenly tore off her veiled bamboo hat, revealing a face full of poison. Because of her deathly pale complexion, she appeared abnormally frightening under the illumination of the lantern light. A ghost. Han Yunqing blurted out. Half of it was an act, the other half was true. She understood this poison, but she had never seen a real case. Han Yunqing, you dare call this princess a ghost? Princess Changping was furious. Did she really look like a ghost? Every imperial physician who had treated her had been frightened by her. She didn't even dare to look at herself in the mirror. No, no. Han Yunqing was extremely weak. She couldn't even shake her head and could only lie there, paralyzed. In reality, after eating medicinal pills, drinking millet porridge, and eating ginseng, Han Yunqing wasn't so weak anymore. However, in front of the domineering Princess Changping, she obviously had to show weakness. Han Yunqing, get up. Imperial physician Gu said you're very good at curing poisons. Hurry and cure me. Hurry. I'm dying from the itch. Princess Changping ordered without any trace of politeness. Leaving aside the fact that Princess Changping was a junior, she was the one asking for help. She shouldn't be shouting and ordering people around like this. If she wasn't given a real lesson, she really wouldn't learn. Princess, Han Yunqing couldn't finish her sentence. Princess Changping was about to die from anxiety. Several times, her hands reached to her face, almost unable to resist scratching it. You what? Hurry up and help me take a look. As she spoke, she suddenly approached Han Yunqing and almost pressed her face against hers. If it were anyone else, they would have vomited already. However, Han Yunqing had seen poisons that were even more disgusting than this, so she was already immune to them. Princess. I don't have the strength. Finally, she finished her sentence. Look. Just take a look. How much strength do you need to take a look? Aren't you very powerful? Why? Can't you do it now? Princess Changping was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. As she ordered, she clenched her fists, afraid that she wouldn't be able to control herself. Then. Princess, take. Han Yunqing was like a person on the verge of death. Hearing this, Princess Changping couldn't bear it any longer and roared, what do you want to say? Princess Changping didn't know that the more agitated she was, the more her adrenaline would surge. This kind of adrenaline would cause the poison on her face to flare up even faster. Bring the lantern, closer so I can see clearly, Han Yunqing said slowly. Although she was angry, at this time, she would definitely do whatever Han Yunqing told her to do. She was extremely obedient and immediately brought the lantern closer. But who knew that when the light shone over, Han Yunqing didn't even look at Princess Changping's face. She suddenly closed her eyes and fainted. Princess Changping was unable to restrain her anger and screamed like a madwoman. How could it be like this? She raised the lantern and was about to smash it on Han Yunqing's face, but in the end, she held it back and endured it like she was enduring an itch. Han Yunqing was her last hope. Hearing this scream, the Empress, who was waiting outside, hurriedly asked, Changping, what's wrong? Princess Changping came out of the carriage and smashed the lantern on the ground. Finally, she burst into tears. She fainted. Woo, that slut actually fainted. Useless thing. As she cried, her hands unconsciously scratched her face. Seeing this, the Empress was frightened and immediately went forward to grab her hands. Don't scratch. You'll ruin your face. A palace maid at the side hurriedly helped her put on the white veil bamboo hat, but who knew that Princess Changping would suddenly break free from the Empress's hands and flip over the hat, fiercely scratching her face. Heaven knows how itchy she was and how hard she scratched. Just this one scratch and her cheeks were already bleeding. Princess Changping didn't seem to feel the pain and continued scratching. The Empress was so frightened that her face turned pale. Someone, quickly stop her and grab her hands. The guards immediately rushed forward and pulled Princess Changping's hands away. Let go of me. You've got guts. Let go. It's so itchy, let go. I order you to let go, I'm going to kill you. Princess Changping violently struggled, scaring the empress into tears. Quickly tie her hands and cover her mouth. Although it was the middle of the night, they were currently on the main street. If they woke up the surrounding commoners and this matter spread, how would Princess Changping be able to face others in the future? Very quickly, Princess Changping's hands were tied and her mouth gagged. The empress looked towards Han Yunqing's carriage, hatred flashing through her red eyes. Han Yunqing, if it weren't for you, Changping wouldn't have gone to the justice courts and wouldn't have been poisoned. You better make sure that Changping's face is safe. Otherwise, this consort and the Empress Dowager definitely won't let you off. After bringing Princess Changping back to her own carriage, the group hurried back to the imperial palace. The horses galloped, but the spacious and comfortable carriage wasn't bumpy at all. Han Yunqing lazily reclined, her eyes closed, but a happy smile appeared on her lips. Those who came out to make a living all had to pay. Those who came out to make a living weren't afraid. When they returned to the palace, the east was already bright. Princess Changping was completely exhausted. The poison seemed to have passed and she had already fainted. Han Yunqing was sent to Princess Changping's Anping Palace. She was half asleep and half awake, allowing the palace maids to place her on a warm bed. Very quickly, the empress and imperial physician Gu came over. She caught a cold and is very weak. She fainted on the way here. The empress explained the general situation. Gu Beiyue didn't say anything. He just sat by the bed and took Han Yunqing's pulse through the curtains. Gu Beiyue was a divine doctor. He knew Han Yunqing's situation with a single pulse. This was caused by starvation. It wasn't an illness, but she was weak and didn't have enough strength. Fortunately, she had already been rescued, so the problem wasn't too big. She was currently recovering, so she shouldn't be as weak as the empress said. Gu Beiyue's clear black eyes flashed with interest. He stood up. Reporting to the empress, this is a severe cold. The Wangfei's body is very weak and needs to be properly nurtured. If we forcefully wake her up to have her treat the princess, this official is afraid. What? The empress quickly asked. Since they were already in the palace, she didn't care how Han Yunqing's body was. As long as she could treat Changping's illness, even if she had to draw Han Yunqing's blood, she would still agree. This official is afraid that not only will the Wangfei not be able to treat Princess Changping's illness, she won't even be able to protect her own life. Gu Beiyue was clearly exaggerating. But how could the empress understand this? Hearing this situation, she became nervous. If it was like this, Changping's face wouldn't be preserved. She wouldn't be able to pay for Han Yunqing's life. If she had known earlier, she would have persuaded Changping to stay in the Duke of Qin's manor. If she was laughed at, then so be it. It was better than being responsible for Han Yunqing's life. The empress took a deep breath. Then let's save her first. How long will it take for her to recover? 1 or 2 days. It's just that Princess Changping will have to suffer a bit. Gu Beiyue honestly replied. The empress frowned. She was so depressed that she couldn't speak. Unfortunately, she had no other choice. She could only instruct Gu Beiyue, use the best medicine. You must let Qin Wangfei recover as soon as possible. Understood. This official understands. Gu Beiyue nodded. This official will go write up the prescription now. Gu Beiyue left. The empress went to see Princess Changping, leaving behind a palace maid to watch over her. Han Yunqing was so happy that she almost laughed out loud. Who knew what Gu Beiyue would use this opportunity to give her to nurse her body back to health? Although 1 or 2 days wasn't enough to completely recover, getting off the bed and moving around wouldn't harm her body. Gu Beiyue was truly a thoughtful and intelligent person. Just as Han Yunqing expected, Gu Beiyue prepared an extremely expensive prescription for warming and nourishing her body. Han Yunqing really wanted to eat a big meal, but a starving person couldn't overeat. If it was light, it would cause indigestion, and if it was heavy, it would cause her to die. Gu Beiyue's prescription not only nourished her body in the most gentle way, it also reduced her intense appetite. With the warm man's medicine and sufficient sleep, Han Yunqing was full of energy after 2 days. However, Princess Changping was miserable. In these 2 days, the poison had flared up 3 times. Each time, it was heart-wrenching, making her want to kill herself. Han Yunqing got off the bed, but Princess Changping was lying down. Her hands and feet were all tied up to prevent her from harming herself. The Empress sat by the bed and tried to persuade her. Princess Changping couldn't listen anymore and muttered, "Where's that slut Han Yunqing? She's not going to save me, is she? Muhu, bring her here. She must be faking it. She must want to see me poisoned to death. It's all because of her. It's all her fault. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have gone to the prisons." Sob sob, "Muhu, she's the one who harmed me. Muhu, let me go. I'm going to find her." Han Yunqing followed Gu Beiyue inside and listened silently. Princess Changping didn't even think about what she was doing in the prisons that night. She actually dared to blame her. When she heard Gu Beiyue talk about her condition these days, she felt a bit of sympathy and wanted to treat her poison today. But now Han Yunqing had gone back on her word. Pitiful people were always hateful. Princess Changping wasn't someone she wanted to save, so there was no need to talk to her about the benevolence of a doctor. Qinxia greets esteemed Empress. This humble subject greets esteemed Empress and Princess. Han Yunqing and Imperial Physician Gu bowed through the curtains. The Empress hastily had them rise and spoke kindly. "Yunxi, hurry and come in. Changping's been waiting for you for a long time." Princess Changping had already stopped making noise, but her phoenix eyes were glaring fiercely at Han Yunqing. Han Yunqing sat down by the bed and said mildly, "It's too dark. Bring the lantern over." A court lady quickly shone the lantern over. The strong light made Princess Changping blink, but she still stubbornly stared at Han Yunqing. Han Yunqing said mildly, "Changping, close your eyes. Let me see if there's any poison on your eyelids." At these words, Princess Changping immediately shut her eyes. Her frightened expression made Han Yunqing feel disdain. What was this girl being so stubborn for? If she had the skills, then keep glaring at her. Han Yunqing carefully examined her face and secretly activated a scanning system to determine the spread of the poison and whether it had changed. Afterwards, she checked the condition of her legs. Princess Changping was lucky that the poison hadn't spread much and hadn't changed. Seeing Han Yunqing finish her examination, the Empress quickly asked, "How is it? Is it poison? What kind of poison is it? Can it be treated?" Princess Changping finally realized that the examination was over. She opened her eyes and ordered arrogantly, "Han Yunqing, what are you dawdling for? Hurry up and say it." Chapter 43. Faced with Princess Changping's cries, Han Yunqing brought out the most professional qualities of a doctor and didn't quibble. Her expression was calm and serious, giving off a sense of authority and an inexplicable sense of security. She didn't answer, but gently stroked Princess Changping's cheek with her fingers, instantly quieting her down. Even the Empress grew nervous and didn't dare to ask. Han Yunqing touched her right side, then her left. Judging from the scan just then, Princess Changping's poison should be flaring up again soon. She calmly touched her face for a long time. Princess Changping and the Empress were both anxious, but they didn't dare to ask again, much less speak rudely. Even Gu Beiyue, who was waiting outside the curtains, felt nervous. He knew Han Yunqing knew how to treat poisons, but he wasn't sure if she could cure the poison on Princess Changping's face. He was only recommending her. The room was silent, the atmosphere tense. But Han Yunqing suddenly let go of her hand, as if frightened. She quickly got up and backed away, crying out, "Heavens, the poison's changed. It's going to be contagious soon." "What?" Hearing this, the Empress backed away like she was running for her life. The court ladies around her all backed away in fear. Too frightening. Once infected with a contagious disease, even a prince would be taken away from the palace and locked up in a side palace in the outskirts. If they couldn't be cured, they'd never be able to come back. Princess Changping gave a start, then started wailing in fear. I don't want it. I don't want it. Sob sob, Muhu, save me. I don't want to be sent away. I don't want it. The empress was the one who retreated the furthest. Her face was pale with anxiety as she asked, Yunshi, can it be cured or not? Han Yunqing avoided answering, her expression grave. It looks like the poison's about to flare up again. As expected, Princess Changping began to struggle as soon as she spoke. Itchy. Muhu, my face is starting to itch again. Let me go. All of you, let go of my hand. Muhu, why don't you help me scratch it? I'm begging you. Soon, her feet began to itch. Unfortunately, her feet were also tied up, so no matter how hard she kicked, it was to no avail. Seeing this, everyone was stunned. They didn't expect Han Yunqing to really have the skills to hit the nail on the head. The empress was frightened and didn't dare to go forward. She grabbed Han Yunqing's hand and asked, You were right. Yunshi, you're too formidable. You must have a way to save Changping, right? Yunshi, an infectious disease isn't a small matter. You must have a way, right? Once this matter was spread out, not only Princess Changping, but even the empress and the others who had interacted with her would be isolated for a long time. As for the empress, even if she didn't get infected, she probably wouldn't be able to see the emperor for a year or so. Deep in the palace, there were so many pairs of eyes staring at the empress. The empress could not afford to lose this 1 year or so. Save me. Imperial mother, quickly ask her to save me. I'm dying of itchiness. Who can help me? Imperial father, woo-woo. I want to see Imperial father. Princess Changping had already been tossed around until her speech was incoherent. At this time, Han Yunqing pushed aside the empress's hand and said seriously, I'll try. Good, good. The empress nodded. Han Yunqing walked over and sat down by Princess Changping's side. Seeing this, everyone grew nervous and stared at her. Could this woman really have a way? Princess Changping screamed crazily, shaking her head and twisting her body. As soon as she saw Han Yunqing, she calmed down and cursed, It's all your fault. It's all because of you. You're the one who made me like this. I'm warning you, if you can't save me, my imperial mother won't let you off. Changping. The empress said sternly. What nonsense are you saying? She was about to apologize to Han Yunqing when Han Yunqing raised a hand to silence her. The empress calmed down, but Princess Changping went even crazier. Han Yunqing, if you... Before she could finish, Han Yunqing applied the ointment to her face. In an instant, Princess Changping shut her mouth, her eyes wide with disbelief. This ointment, it felt so good. The area where the ointment was applied was ice cold and didn't itch at all. What? Han Yunqing asked in a low voice. Princess Changping froze and shook her head. No, nothing. Han Yunqing then applied some ointment on another piece of the poison. The cool, refreshing sensation of stopping the itch made her feel like a celestial being. Princess Changping took a deep breath before exhaling, sighing with emotion. So comfortable. Comfortable? Han Yunqing asked with a smile. Princess Changping nodded. I want more. I want more. Han Yunqing hesitated, her expression difficult. Princess Changping was very nervous as she looked at the large bottle of ointment in Han Yunqing's hands. She couldn't care less about face as she begged, Imperial Qin Aunt, I'm begging you, I'm begging you. I was wrong, I brought this upon myself. I was wrong, please save me. Seeing this, the empress panicked. Yunshi, Changping is still young and doesn't know any better. If she's offended you in any way, please don't take it to heart. Han Yunqing turned back. Esteemed Empress must be joking. How could Yunqi bear a grudge against a junior? It's just that there are wounds on her face. If I use this ointment, Yunqi's afraid it'll leave a scar, so I'm hesitating. As she spoke, she sat down at the foot of the bed and applied the ointment on Princess Changping's wounds. First stop the itch on your feet. As for the wounds on your face, I suggest the princess bear with it for now to avoid disfigurement. I'll do my best to create an antidote before the virus spreads. At these words, the Empress exhaled in relief. Very good, very good. She quickly told Princess Changping, just bear with it. If your face is disfigured, your Qinggu Gige won't want you anymore. Princess Changping's tears kept flowing. Fine, fine, fine. I'll bear with it, I can bear with it, sob. I've already endured so many times. She did her best to focus on the cool feeling on her feet, but as she spoke, her hands couldn't help but struggle. It was too itchy, too painful. After applying the ointment, Han Yunqing only said, these next few days might be contagious, so it's best if you don't get close to her. These words, without a doubt, sent Princess Changping to hell. Familial love was never pure in the imperial family. The Empress wouldn't come to see Princess Changping again. She only left behind a few court ladies to wait on her before hurriedly leaving with Han Yunqing. Seeing Han Yunqing's retreating form, Princess Changping was filled with hatred. But who knew how many more days of torment she'd have to endure? They hadn't even reached the guest hall when the Empress asked anxiously. Yunqi, what kind of poison is this? It's a poisonous moss. She probably caught it in the imperial prisons. That place is too dirty and full of toxins. Han Yunqing said, pretending to be serious. Esteemed Empress, the princess is a golden branch and jade leaf. If there's nothing important, she shouldn't run to the imperial prisons. Of course the Empress knew about Princess Changping's private torture in the imperial prisons. At this moment, faced with Han Yunqing's ridicule, her face turned red. She was both embarrassed and angry, but she had no choice but to grit her teeth and endure. Gu Beiyue snuck a peek at Han Yunqing from the side, a smile rising on his lips. This woman really didn't suffer any losses. What was owed to her had to be returned. After a long time, the Empress spoke again. Then how long will it take for her to fully recover? She'll be fine as long as the poison is cured. I'll write a prescription for the antidote, so hurry and have someone grab the medicine. Han Yunqing said as she strode through the door. The Empress followed closely behind, hastily ordering people to serve her with brush and ink. Most prescriptions for antidotes only had a few ingredients, but Han Yunqing had written down a whole pile of them. It was a full 2 pages of white paper, and there was no lack of rare and precious ingredients within. The Empress didn't understand, but Gu Beiyue almost couldn't help but laugh out loud. This woman, is she sure she's writing down an antidote? She's clearly looting a burning house. There were quite a few ingredients here that were contradictory to each other, so they definitely couldn't appear in the same prescription. In the end, Gu Beiyue thought that Han Yunqing was going to stop writing, but she actually took out a third piece of white paper and wrote down the last ingredient, 10 segments cicada slew. Cicadas shed their shells after becoming black grasshoppers. It was a very common ingredient in Chinese medicine, but most cicadas only had 9 segments on their abdomen. A 10-segment cicada slew was a rarity. The Empress didn't understand, but Gu Beiyue, who was familiar with the imperial medicine storehouse, had a complicated look in his eyes, but he didn't say anything. Your Highness, this is the prescription. Grab the medicine according to what's written on it, the sooner the better. I'll personally boil it. Han Yunqing said with a serious face. The Empress took the prescription and immediately handed it to Gu Beiyue. Imperial Physician Gu, I'll leave this matter to you. You must find all the ingredients as soon as possible. The Empress really thought that things were too simple, but she couldn't be blamed. What kind of medicine didn't the Imperial Medicine Storehouse have? Gu Beiyue nodded and immediately left. Of course, in the afternoon, he found all the ingredients on the prescription and sent them to Han Yunqing. Only the 10-segment cicada slough was missing. This thing isn't in the Imperial Palace? The Empress had a look of disbelief. Have you seriously looked for it? Your Highness, this official is certain that it isn't in the Imperial Medicine Storehouse. As Gu Beiyue spoke, he inadvertently glanced at Han Yunqing before continuing, the 10-segment cicada slough is a priceless item. Only 2 have appeared so far. One is in the hands of the northernly country's Empress, and the other, where is it? The Empress grew anxious. This official only knows that it's in Grand Concubine Yi's hands. As for whether or not she's used it, this official doesn't know, Gu Beiyue replied truthfully. It's in Mufei's hands. Han Yunqing's face was filled with astonishment. All right, she knew long ago. Otherwise, she wouldn't have written out such a prescription. She'd seen it in Grand Concubine Yi's rooms before. It had already been meticulously framed into a work of art. Supposedly, it was meant to be Murong Wanru's dowry. Every time Murong Wanru saw it, she was always delighted. Now the Empress was in a difficult position. It wasn't easy to take something from Grand Concubine Yi's hands. After some hesitation, the Empress said sincerely, Yunqi, why don't you talk to your Mufei? Han Yunqing sighed. Your Highness, my Mufei is a kind-hearted person. She'll definitely help save someone, but, the Empress waited nervously for her to continue. If I go and ask for it, wouldn't I tell her about Changping's illness? But you and Changping won't let me. Han Yunqing was in a difficult position. These words finally made the Empress realize the crux of the matter. Her eyes turned cold as she began to suspect that Han Yunqing was doing this on purpose. After Han Yunqing cured Changping and returned, Grand Concubine Yi would definitely interrogate her. Then she'd be stuck between a rock and a hard place. If she spoke, she'd offend the Empress, but if she didn't, Grand Concubine Yi would be unhappy. If she went to ask for the medicine now, it meant the Empress was giving her permission to tell Grand Concubine Yi the truth. Nobody could blame her then. The Empress was furious in her heart. What a smart Han Yunqing. She'd underestimated her too much in the past. Seeing the Empress hesitate, Han Yunqing waited patiently. Actually, she already had the antidote in her medical pouch. She only wanted to ask for some ingredients as payment for the consultation and take care of Grand Concubine Yi's troubles while paving the way for her own return. Chapter 44. The Empress's eyes flickered between light and darkness. Still, despite her anger, she had no other choice since she was the one asking for help. She hid her anger and spoke kindly. Yunqi, how about this? Just say that Changping's sick. As for what illness it is, don't mention it. After all, it's not a good thing, so it won't be good if word gets out. Empress, my Mufei isn't an outsider. Naturally, she won't spread the news. Han Yunqing was a good daughter-in-law and immediately defended her mother-in-law. The Empress nodded and coaxed, of course, but Changping's illness is contagious, and it's on her face. A girl hasn't married yet, so we have to leave her some face, don't you think? Han Yunqing looked understanding and nodded. Qinxia understands. Then we'll say that Changping has a heart fever and needs the 10-segment cicada slough to clear the heat and detoxify the poison. MHM, just say it like that. You should make a trip yourself. The Empress probed. She'd already yielded so far, so there was no way she'd lower her face to beg Grand Concubine Yi. That would be too sullen. If Han Yunqing went, then there'd be no point in her doing this. She wouldn't go, but said, I still have to watch over the princess in case the poison becomes contagious. Esteemed Empress, there's no time to lose. You should find someone to go in my place. The Empress grew nervous again at the mention of contagious poison. Without a choice, she could only push the matter to Gu Beiyue. Gu Beiyue didn't express any opinions, but respectfully agreed. He immediately went to the Duke of Qin's estate to ask for the medicine. She didn't know how things were over at the Duke of Qin's estate the entire afternoon, but Gu Beiyue still hadn't returned. The Empress sat restlessly in the guest hall, waiting anxiously. Meanwhile, Han Yunqing was hiding in the kitchens, saying she was concentrating on making the antidote. She didn't want anyone to disturb her, but she'd long swapped out all the precious ingredients. She took out all the precious ingredients and the ones she didn't have in her detox system. Then she took out some common ingredients and mixed them all together. Right now, she was huddled by the stove to warm herself while pondering the situation at the Duke of Qin's estate. Grand Concubine Yi had always thought that she'd lost face after being imprisoned. Now that she was giving her a chance to regain some face, she should be happy. Since Princess Changping was ill and needed the medicine, Grand Concubine Yi couldn't deny it. Han Yunqing was certain that Grand Concubine Yi would give her this medicine. Most likely, Murong Wanru would be disappointed to see her long-cherished dowry taken away. Thinking up to here, Han Yunqing was amused. But Han Yunqing never expected Grand Concubine Yi to enter the palace with Gu Beiyue at sunset. Even the Empress was very surprised and forced a smile to receive him. Grand Concubine Yi, it's only a single type of medicine. Changping can't afford to trouble you to deliver it personally. The Empress didn't ask any questions, but took the initiative to strike first. But Grand Concubine Yi's face was stern. Empress, it's not that I want to criticize you, but you're hiding such an important matter from even me? And here I thought Changping invited Yunxi to the palace to play. Who knew she was here to treat an illness? Before the Empress could explain, Grand Concubine Yi glanced at Han Yunqing and said, if I knew she was here to treat an illness, I wouldn't have let her come. What kind of medical skills does she have? Won't she just randomly prescribe medicine to treat Changping's illness? Han Yunqing lowered her head and didn't say a word. The Empress grew anxious and hastened to explain. How could that be? There's Imperial Physician Gu here to check things out. Imperial Physician Gu checks things out. Then let Imperial Physician Gu treat her, it'll be safe. Grand Concubine Yi said, looking straight at Han Yunqing. She's just an ignorant and incompetent liar. If she knew how to treat illnesses, she wouldn't be called trash. Just a few days ago, she almost spent her whole life in jail. What can she treat? At these words, the Empress's face turned black. She was clearly taking deep breaths. Grand Concubine Yi had come to find trouble today. Still, the Empress was the Empress. Her self-cultivation was excellent. She sighed helplessly. Aya, my esteemed Imperial Concubine, don't be so modest. Who dares to call Yunxi trash? I'll be the first to object. That matter with the young general was a misunderstanding, Changping's already apologized, so a great person like you shouldn't bicker with a petty person. Grand Concubine Yi was delighted to hear this and looked askance at her. Who doesn't know that Changping's bad temper came from spoiling her? Anger flashed past the Empress's eyes, but she held it in. She rose and bowed, half joking and half serious. Yes. It's Qinxia's fault. Qinxia will apologize to esteemed Imperial Concubine. Grand Concubine Yi pretended to be nervous and hastened to support her. I can't accept it. I was just joking. Which elder doesn't dote on a child? Take our family's Yunxi for example, I still spoil her every day. Hearing the two women in the palace exchange false affections, Han Yunqing and Gu Beiyue both felt goosebumps rise on their skin as they looked at each other in silence. Still, Han Yunqing knew that her days back home wouldn't be as hard as before. Grand Concubine Yi was enjoying herself to her heart's content. She had the mood and time to pretend, but the Empress didn't. She was worried about Princess Changping's infection period and didn't want to waste a second. Grand Concubine Yi, Yunxi's medical skills don't lose to Imperial Physician Gu's. I don't know what rumors are spreading outside to call her trash. As I see it, the Empress Dowager is right. The Duke of Qin married Yunxi and picked up a big bargain, the Empress said seriously. If this was the past, Grand Concubine Yi would find these words ironic, but now she felt comfortable listening to them. She originally thought that there was something fishy about Han Yunqing curing the young general, but after Imperial Physician Gu came to explain the situation in the afternoon, she was stunned. She never expected Han Yunqing's medical skills to be so good. Now it looked like the Empress Dowager regretted forcing the Duke of Qin to marry Han Yunqing. The Empress apologized and said good things, making Grand Concubine Yi feel comfortable in her heart. She'd fought with the Empress Dowager for so many years, but it had been a long time since she'd felt so satisfied. Thus, she easily took out the 10-section cicada slough. She didn't give it to the Empress, but personally handed it to Han Yunqing with a kind tone. "Yunqi, you have to be careful. I'll leave Princess Changping to you." Han Yunqing rose to accept it. "Mu Fei, don't worry. Qinxia understands. Qinxia will go boil the medicine right away. Esteemed Wang Fei, this official will be your assistant," Gu Beiyue hastened to say. He knew Han Yunqing's prescription was fake and was curious to know what the real antidote was. The head imperial physician was going to be Han Yunqing's assistant. Grand Concubine Yi was even happier as she chuckled. "Imperial physician Gu, go. Hurry and go." But halfway there, Han Yunqing dismissed Gu Beiyue with a single sentence. "Imperial physician Gu, why don't you go take a look at Princess Changping's?" Gu Beiyue knew she didn't want him to follow. He hesitated, wanting to say something, but chose to remain silent in the end. With a smile, he said, "This official obeys." But before he could leave, Han Yunqing turned back with a smile like a flower. "Gu Beiyue, thanks." So speaking, she turned and left, leaving Gu Beiyue stunned. After a while, he helplessly shook his head, his smiling eyes as gentle as an April spring breeze. Han Yunqing went to the kitchens and took care of all the medicine she'd boiled before taking out the antidote from her medical pouch and boiling it into a decoction before personally carrying it out. The Empress and Grand Concubine Yi were both waiting by Princess Changping's door. Seeing Han Yunqing personally bring the medicine over, the Empress rejoiced. "This is the medicine, right?" "Exactly," Han Yunqing nodded. The Empress personally opened the door, but didn't enter. She even stopped Grand Concubine Yi from entering. "Esteemed Imperial Concubine, it smells of medicine inside. Changping's afraid of the wind and hasn't opened the windows in days. It's better if we wait outside." Grand Concubine Yi was a clean freak. Now that she smelled something wrong, she hesitated. "That's fine too." Imperial Physician Gu naturally followed them inside, leaving the Empress and Grand Concubine Yi outside. Although it was said to be curable, whether it was cured or not would depend on the final results. The Empress was very nervous, so was Grand Concubine Yi, who'd come all the way to the palace to show off her arrogance. But they ended up waiting for an hour before the Empress couldn't sit still any longer. "Someone come, go inside and see what's going on." Grand Concubine Yi furrowed her brows, thinking to herself, Han Yunqing, Han Yunqing. I came here today to gain face. If you make me lose face in the palace, I won't just starve you for a few days and nights when I get back. The court lady was afraid of being infected, but had no choice but to enter the room. Unexpectedly, the door opened from the inside just as she was about to enter. It was Gu Beiyue who opened the door with Han Yunqing behind him. Very soon, they saw the windows on both sides open as well. The Empress and Grand Concubine Yi rose at the same time, speaking at the same time. "How is it?" "The medicine has cured the illness. It's just that the princess has been tired out these past few days and her body is very weak. She needs time to nurse herself back to health," Han Yunqing replied calmly. "Really?" The Empress's face was incredulous. "Really, it's all better." Actually, she wanted to ask if it was still contagious. This was just Han Yunqing's mischievous prank. She nodded and said, "Esteemed Empress, Changping must really want to see you. You should hurry inside." With Han Yunqing's words, the Empress's heart finally settled back down. Without a word, she entered the room. Grand Concubine Yi felt that something was off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She hurried inside as well. Inside the room, Princess Changping's hands and feet had already been freed. Although her body was weak, her mind was abnormally excited. She was ordering a servant girl to bring her a mirror. Although her skin was rougher than before and there were scars on both sides of her face, it was still better than having a face full of poison. Although Imperial Physician Gu and Han Yunqing had both said that the scars on her face would take a few months to disappear, she was so excited that she didn't care about such details. Her face was healed and wouldn't be disfigured. She wouldn't infect others. Princess Changping didn't want to admit it, but it had to be said that Han Yunqing had saved her face for a lifetime. The Empress hurried back and covered her mouth in shock at the sight of Princess Changping's face. Heavens, it was true. All the imperial physicians and famous poison doctors couldn't treat her illness, but Han Yunqing's bowl of medicine had cured her. And the effects had been so quick. The Empress sat down and looked at her daughter's white face, so moved that she couldn't speak. But Grand Concubine Yi was puzzled. Changping, you caught a fever. How did you injure your face? Wasn't it because she couldn't take it and scratched herself? The Empress hastened to find an excuse. Princess Changping was completely immersed in her joy as she stared fixedly at the mirror. She didn't pay attention to anyone who spoke. What, Yunqi didn't treat her while you were at it? Grand Concubine Yi asked doubtfully. At this moment, the mama on the side spoke up. To reply, esteemed imperial concubine, Qin Wangfei prescribed some medicine for external use. She said it'd take a few months for her to fully recover. Grand Concubine Yi was very satisfied as she smiled. That's good. Hee hee, Changping, it's your good fortune to have such an imperial aunt. Chapter 45. Good fortune. Princess Changping looked over and was about to speak when the Empress stopped her. Isn't that so? This is all thanks to Grand Imperial Concubine's medicine. Qinxie will definitely report this to the Empress Dowager and have her prepare a large gift to thank you both. The Empress didn't dare let the Empress Dowager know about this, but she knew that Grand Concubine Yi wouldn't leave unless she did. This time, she'd had enough. Once Changping recovered, she really didn't want to see Grand Concubine Yi and Han Yunqing again. Grand Concubine Yi was flushed with success as she beamed from ear to ear. You're too polite, too polite. No need. Yunqi was even bestowed to the Duke of Qin's estate by the Empress Dowager. Han Yunqing explained a few more things to take note of before returning to the estate with Grand Concubine Yi. Seeing the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law leave hand in hand, the Empress stomped her feet angrily before turning to stride back into the rooms. Princess Changping was still immersed in her joy. How could she know how much her mother had suffered in order to save her? Changping, you better be careful when you do things in the future. This time, it wasn't just me, but your imperial grandmother's face as well. You didn't see how smug Grand Concubine Yi was. The Empress was panting with rage. Only then did Princess Changping have the servants take away the mirror. Muhu, you can't blame me for this. Isn't it all Han Yunqing's fault? If not for her, I never would have gone to a damned place like the imperial prisons. It's only right that she saved me. Don't expect me to repay her. You're still talking. When have you ever made Muhu feel at ease with your work? The Empress roared. Princess Changping was startled. She'd never been yelled at by Muhu before. I. Princess Changping trailed off. Princess Changping thought for a moment. Imperial Mother, who knows if she was the one who poisoned me? I've long suspected that she was the one who poisoned Qingwu Gij as well. Otherwise, how could a good-for-nothing like her suddenly become so powerful? Of course only she could cure her own poison. At these words, the Empress was on guard. A good-for-nothing like Han Yunqing suddenly becoming a genius was truly unimaginable. Imperial Mother, why don't we test her again? Princess Changping hurriedly suggested. The Empress's cold eyes deepened and a scheming look flashed through her eyes. Even if Han Yunqing was married, she was still a member of the Han family and the daughter of divine Dr. Han. Perhaps, she could discuss with the Empress Dowager. As soon as they left the palace, Grand Concubine Yi released Han Yunqing's hand. Han Yunqing wasn't surprised. She knew that as the daughter of the Empress Dowager's benefactor, she was Grand Concubine Yi's enemy. She didn't expect the Grand Concubine to treat her like her own daughter, but she wanted less trouble. Once inside the carriage, Grand Concubine Yi's first words were, "Where did you learn your medical skills?" Han Yunqing was answering Long Fei Yi the same way she answered Grand Concubine Yi back then. No matter who asked, she'd give the same answer. Whether it was Long Fei Yi or Grand Concubine Yi, they'd both investigated her beforehand. They wouldn't be able to find any flaws in her behavior in the Han family, and they wouldn't be able to find any clues here. Grand Concubine Yi's face turned gloomy at the mention of Lady Tianxin. She didn't pursue the matter, nor did she pursue the matter of her imprisonment in the imperial prisons. Murong Wanru was waiting by the gates, her usually quiet and obedient face now terrifyingly gloomy. Her heart had been stifled for half a day. The 10-section cicada slough was the dowry she'd been looking forward to ever since she was young. She never expected to lose it all because of Han Yunqing's prescription. In the past, no matter how much she hated people, she could always smile naturally. But facing Han Yunqing, she almost couldn't do it. Seeing Grand Concubine Yi and Han Yunqing approach from afar, Murong Wanru couldn't stop taking deep breaths. It took a long time for her to calm down. She strode forward with a face full of concern. "Sister-in-law, how was it? The Empress and Princess didn't make things difficult for you, did they?" Han Yunqing's lips rose into a cold smile as she said mildly, "Mu Fei's already gone. How could they dare to make things difficult for me? Mu Fei would lose face." These words gave Murong Wanru a start and she hastened to explain. "Mu Fei, that's not what I meant. I'm just worried about sister-in-law." Her aggrieved expression made Han Yunqing feel like she'd really bullied her. Grand Concubine pursed her lips, a little impatient. "Han Yunqing, it's good that you know how to take care of my face. In the future, on the 1st of every month, come to the accounts to get your allowance. As a Wangfei, you need to act like one. Look at how poor you look." So speaking, she disdainfully sized her up from head to toe before turning to leave. But Murong Wanru was left dumbfounded. Mu Fei was actually going to give Han Yunqing her allowance. With that, Han Yunqing would have even more freedom. Then how was she supposed to make things difficult for Han Yunqing in the future? Murong Wanru couldn't accept it. She couldn't maintain her docile expression any longer as her face grew taut. "Little sister, I heard the 10 segments of the cicada slough was your dowry. It can't be true, right?" Han Yunqing asked her on purpose. "You." Murong Wanru was so angry that tears rolled down her cheeks. With a snort, she turned and ran off. Seeing this, Han Yunqing laughed out loud. "Murong Wanru, ah, Murong Wanru. Sooner or later, I'll beat you back to your original form." After taking care of Murong Wanru, Han Yunqing thought of the precious ingredients she'd brought back from the palace and felt even better. She skipped all the way back to the hibiscus courtyard, but as soon as she reached the gardens, she ran into the giant iceberg, Long Fei Yi. When did this guy come back? This guy who appeared and disappeared like a ghost seemed to always come back for business. Last time, he'd asked her for an antidote. Just whose poison did he want to cure? And that time when he was poisoned, what was that about? According to Han Yunqing's understanding, Long Fei Ye's martial arts weren't bad. The person who could injure him couldn't be weak either. Han Yunqing unconsciously stopped and looked into the distance. She saw Long Fei Yi sitting among the flowers, drinking tea by himself. With his cold, hard lines and sharp features, even if he was just sitting there casually, the aura he exuded from his every movement was so elegant and noble, like a lofty king. One person and one cup of tea formed a world of their own that no one could enter. Han Yunqing unconsciously stared at him in a daze again. It wasn't until a piercingly cold gaze shot over that she abruptly came back to her senses. Long Fei Yi looked directly at her from afar. Han Yunqing reflexively showed a friendly smile. "You're back." But she quickly regretted it. What did his return have to do with her? With a fake smile, Han Yunqing turned to leave. Long Fei Yi domineeringly ordered, "Come here." Han Yunqing ignored him and continued walking. "This prince has been waiting for you for a long time." Long Fei Ye's voice became unyielding. "Waiting for her? To cure the poison again?" "All right." Han Yunqing admitted that she was a little curious, but also a little afraid of his strength. She turned back and sat down in front of Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi opened his mouth and asked, "Princess Changping's matter has been resolved?" He knew. "Your Highness's information is really fast," Han Yunqing said. Long Fei Yi didn't pursue the matter and indifferently said, "Rest early. Come out with me early tomorrow morning." This guy wanted to take her out. To do what? Han Yunqing was curious. Things like going to a banquet or meeting friends. Han Yunqing didn't have any extravagant requests. To cure the poison. Long Fei Ye's words were concise and comprehensive. It was this again. Han Yunqing really wanted to tell him that she might as well quit being his Wang Fei and change professions to become his personal poison doctor. Faced with this question of changing professions, Han Yunqing's attitude was still very professional. "Cure what kind of poison?" "You'll know when you get there," Long Fei Yi said. Han Yunqing nodded. "I want to pay the consultation fee." Long Fei Ye's face was full of disdain and he wasn't even willing to answer. He only nodded and got up to leave. After taking 2 steps, he said, "I'll come find you tomorrow morning at 3 in the morning." Han Yunqing was about to nod when she suddenly froze. "Wait. 3 in the morning?" 3 in the morning was between 3 in the morning to 5 in the morning. In the eyes of the ancients, this was considered the morning of the next day. But in Han Yunqing's eyes, this was the middle of the night. Waking up early in the winter was the most painful thing, not to mention going out. Han Yunqing's face was pale. She quickly chased after him. "You can either go tonight or go tomorrow after the sun comes up." "I can't go this early." "Why?" Long Fei Yi asked with a frown. Han Yunqing only replied with one word. "Cold." "I'll pay double the consultation fee." Long Fei Yi was very generous, but who knew that Han Yunqing's attitude was firm? "I won't go even if it's 10 times the price." At this moment, Long Fei Yi turned his head and asked, "Han Yunqing, is there any poison that you don't know how to cure?" Han Yunqing was slightly taken aback, but then she replied with a serious attitude, "That's hard to say. There are countless types of poisons in the world. Under the same type, there are countless branches. Even if it's the same type of poison, depending on the depth of the poison, the time of poisoning, and the person's physical condition, the antidote will be different. So, Qinxia can't give you a definite answer." Long Fei Yi listened attentively, then asked again, "What if it's not a person poisoned? Is it an animal poisoned?" Han Yunqing was puzzled. The first thing that came to mind was this guy's horse. Otherwise, what other animal could he keep? But, to save his horse, he didn't have to go out in the middle of the night, did he? Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi didn't answer, but said indifferently, "You'll know when you go. Rest early. I'll come and find you at 3 in the morning." With that, he left. Han Yunqing chased after him for a few steps, but couldn't catch up. "Hey, what's going on? What was it that was poisoned? Tell me clearly. If you don't tell me, I'm really not going." No matter how Han Yunqing threatened him, Long Fei Yi didn't look back. Soon, his figure was submerged in the bushes. Han Yunqing was stunned on the spot. She was depressed. What kind of poison was it? What kind of inhuman thing was poisoned? Did he have to keep her in suspense like this? Did she want to go or not? As a senior poison doctor, she had a very strong professional curiosity. In the modern era, she had studied almost all the poisonous bacteria that she could get her hands on. Now that she was in the ancient era, she had a childlike desire to know more about the poisonous bacteria and toxins that were extinct in the modern era. Long Fei was being so mysterious. Just what was going on? That night, Han Yunqing tossed and turned restlessly in bed. Time passed unknowingly. Dong dong dong. The strong knocking sound woke Han Yunqing, who had just fallen asleep. Looking at the hourglass, it was 3 in the morning. Han Yunqing wore the thickest clothes in the wardrobe, but it still couldn't warm her up. As soon as the door opened, Long Fei's lofty, mountain-like body blocked most of it. Still, the bone-chilling wind still managed to find its way in. She hadn't even stepped out of the threshold before her teeth started chattering. She hurriedly hid by the door. She had a small physique, and with her hands in her sleeves and her neck shrunk, she appeared even smaller. Long Fei Yi looked at her pitiful appearance from high above, and his lips curled into a disdainful smile. This woman was really weak. Are you still going? Coldly, he asked. Who knew that when Han Yunqing raised her head, her face was deathly pale. However, that pair of bright eyes sparkled with stubbornness. She was so cold that her lips were trembling, but her voice didn't tremble. Go, of course I'm going. 300 taels, not a single tael less. Long Fei Ye's heart jolted slightly. He had to admit that every single word in this reply was out of his expectations. Chapter 46. Long Fei Ye's eyes flashed with admiration that even he himself didn't realize. He took out the money pouch and threw it to Han Yunqing. However, Han Yunqing threw it back and said seriously, "It's not too late to accept it when you see the poison." She was a little woman who loved money but wasn't greedy. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything and just turned to leave. Han Yunqing hurriedly followed him out. Oh my! The wind outside was so strong. It was more than twice as cold as the room. Long Fei Yi walked very quickly. Han Yunqing trotted behind him, thinking that they could take a carriage after they got out of the door, right? But who knew that Long Fei Yi would stop at the entrance of Hibiscus Courtyard? Han Yunqing hid behind him to avoid the wind. She shivered and asked, "What's wrong?" Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi turned around and opened his arms to raise his large cloak. He said coldly and domineeringly, "Come in." The wind made his cloak flutter. In the dark night, his features were cold and resolute. His brows were sharp like knives. He was like a god of darkness, looking down at her from high above. Han Yunqing was stunned. She didn't understand what this meant. Long Fei Yi didn't have that much patience. He reached out and pulled her into his embrace, placing her under his arm. His hand closed, and the large cloak wrapped around her tightly, blocking the invasion of the cold wind. In that instant, Han Yunqing's heart thumped and sped up. She panicked, "Oh my God!" His body was so warm and exuded the mesmerizing scent of ambergris. Was this what it felt like to be under the wings of an angel? It was so warm. Before Han Yunqing could recover her wits, Long Fei had already wrapped his arms around her. With a light tap of his feet, they flew towards the northwest of the capital city. Han Yunqing wrapped herself in a cloak and snuggled into Long Fei Ye's warm embrace. She followed Long Fei Yi as they flew through the air. Their speed was even faster than riding a horse. In the dark night, other than the occasional flickering lights, she couldn't see anything clearly. She didn't know where he was taking her, but she was very relieved. Although her body was warm, the wind blowing against her face was cold and sharp like a knife. Soon, Han Yunqing couldn't stand it anymore. She turned her face sideways and lowered her head, but she couldn't avoid it. In the end, she had no choice but to carefully turn her body sideways. She moved a little. Seeing that Long Fei Yi did not respond, she became bolder. She stretched her arms behind him and leaned to the side, burying her head in his body. This time, she was finally completely warm. It would be a lie to say that she wasn't nervous. She stiffened for a while. Seeing that Long Fei Yi didn't have any objections, she slowly relaxed and enjoyed the warmth. Long Fei kept his eyes forward as he maintained his speed. Still, his lips had somehow curved into a curve as well, as if he disdained her cowardice. It was as if he was toying with her boldness, just like his deep, dark eyes, mysterious and enchanting. It was hard to fathom what he was thinking. He led her over walls and over mountains. She could only feel the wind whizzing past her. She was oblivious to everything around her. Unknowingly, she became sleepy and fell into a daze. It wasn't until Long Fei Yi brought her down and stood on the ground that she woke up. She poked her head out of his embrace and found herself on a high cliff. It was early in the morning. Long Fei Yi looked down. "You can let go now." Ah! She was stunned. Only then did she realize that this guy had let go of her a long time ago. Her hands had hugged his waist from behind. Han Yunqing blushed. As if she had been electrocuted, she hurriedly retracted her arms and struggled out of his wide cloak. The moment she left his protection, the cold attacked her from all directions. However, Han Yunqing still felt that her face was very, very hot. She didn't look at him and tried her best to ignore the awkwardness. She said mildly, "What are we doing here?" Long Fei Yi looked at the sky and said, "Wait for another 15 minutes. Strange. Why did this guy bring her here? Wasn't he here to cure the poison? Would someone come in another 15 minutes? Han Yunqing didn't ask any more questions. She looked around and realized that there were towering mountains and precipitous ridges around her. She couldn't tell where she was, and below the cliff was an abyss. The morning fog hadn't dispersed yet, so she couldn't see the bottom. The sun had already risen, and the white sky was dyed golden. It was a spectacular sight. Han Yunqing hadn't seen the sunrise in a long time. She was lost in thought when a beeping sound suddenly sounded in her mind. Poison. Judging from the rhythm and volume of the beeping sound, this poison wasn't ordinary. It was very large. Han Yunqing was alert. She turned to look at Long Fei Yi, who was also watching the sunrise. "There's poison nearby. What's going on?" Long Fei Yi was a little surprised. "How did you know? This poison is very strange. Tell me what's going on." Han Yunqing was serious. At this moment, Long Fei Yi looked down at the abyss. This abyss is filled with poisonous fog all year round. It sinks to the bottom of the abyss at night and floats up when the sun rises. Han Yunqing was very surprised. She didn't expect that it wasn't humans or animals that were poisoned, but the air. "Do you want to go down?" Han Yunqing asked. "There's a spy from the northernly country hiding below. He's good at using poison." Long Fei Yi said lightly. So that's how it was. He came to capture people, but he was blocked by the poisonous fog and couldn't go down. Han Yunqing watched the white fog slowly rising. Her beautiful eyebrows slowly knitted together. It seemed that things weren't as Long Fei Yi thought. "Can you do it?" Long Fei Yi asked. At this moment, a quarter of an hour was up. She saw a cloud of black gas faintly appear in the white fog. The alarm in Han Yunqing's head reached the highest level. However, very quickly, the black gas drifted back into the valley and disappeared. "See, this cloud of black gas is the most poisonous," Long Fei Yi said lightly. Unexpectedly, Han Yunqing said, "This isn't poisonous fog." The poisonous fog that Long Fei Yi spoke of was actually miasma. It was the foul air of the mountains and forests, appearing at the end of spring and disappearing at the end of autumn. If there wasn't enough temperature, miasma wouldn't form. Now that it was winter, even the places where the sun shone on the mountaintop were freezing to death, to say nothing of the shady valley. "Then what is it?" Long Fei Yi was alarmed. He had once sent a group of elite soldiers down there, but half of them died before they could find the person. Those who escaped said there was miasma down there, so it wasn't long before they all died of poison. The spy hiding in the valley held important military secrets of Tianing country in his hands. If he escaped, the consequences would be unthinkable. He'd already chased after him for more than a month. Last time, he'd been poisoned because of that spy. This spy was very treacherous. He'd waited until the last moment to use his poison skills. Before that, no one knew he could use poison. Long Fei Yi had chased him all the way here, but the spy had hidden himself in the sealed valley and hadn't come out again. It should be a poisonous mosquito swarm. Han Yunqing was surprised as well. She hadn't expected to run into something like this. Many ancient texts had recorded that when a cloud of miasma floated past, people would die of poison. This cloud of miasma was then called miasma. But in reality, that black cloud of miasma wasn't real miasma, but a large number of mosquitoes flying together. The ancients mistook it for miasma. These mosquitoes carried the bacteria of malignant malaria. If humans and animals were bitten by them, they'd be infected and die quickly. It was like being poisoned. Under these conditions, it was impossible for a poisonous miasma to form, but it was very possible that there was a swarm of poisonous mosquitoes hidden in the valley fog. Poisonous mosquito swarm. This was the first time Long Fei Yi had heard of this term. The white fog isn't poisonous. That cloud of black miasma is the poisonous mosquito swarm. When there's not enough light, it looks like black miasma, so you've all misunderstood. Han Yunqing explained seriously, then said, "Take me down. I have to get close to that cloud of black miasma to know what kind of poisonous mosquito it is." In modern times, there were countless types of poisonous mosquitoes, not to mention in ancient times. Many of them had not gone extinct, so there were definitely more of them than in modern times. Han Yunqing had to determine whether she could recognize them or not, and whether she could make an effective mosquito repellent. After confirming that the white fog wasn't poisonous, everything was simple for Long Fei Yi. Without saying anything, he grabbed Han Yunqing's waist and jumped down. As soon as they entered the valley, Han Yunqing's detoxification system detected the presence of poison. Soon, she determined the direction. "It's on the right." Long Fei Yi hugged her tightly and flew over in an instant. However, not long after, the detoxification system reminded them that there was poison on the left as well. Could it be that there was more than one swarm? Han Yunqing was shocked. Who knew that at this time, the detoxification system's emergency warning came from above and below? Heavens, above, below, left, and right. Was this the rhythm of surrounding them? "We're surrounded," Han Yunqing whispered. Before she could finish speaking, Long Fei Yi saw a black, fog-like thing rapidly encircling them from all directions. Long Fei Yi didn't expect there to be 4 swarms, but he was very calm. "How close do we have to be to detect the poison?" "Hurry up and leave, it's too dangerous. They're very fast." Han Yunqing made a prompt decision to escape. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi coldly said, "Answer this prince's question." 10 steps, 10 steps away. I can determine what poison it is." Han Yunqing answered truthfully. 10 steps. Based on the current speed of the poisonous mosquito swarm, after 10 steps, they would be able to reach them in an instant. Moreover, they were surrounded from above, below, left, and right. In other words, when the poisonous mosquito swarm was 10 steps away from them, they would be submerged in the black fog in an instant. Han Yunqing didn't even dare to think about it. She still didn't know what kind of poison the poisonous mosquito swarm carried, and she wasn't sure if she could neutralize it. Moreover, if she was poisoned, what would she do? Just as she was feeling nervous, Long Fei Yi only said 2 words, "Wait." "No!" Han Yunqing shouted. She watched as the poisonous mosquito swarm came closer and closer. She seemed to be able to hear that terrifying and annoying buzzing sound. "Prepare to be tested." Long Fei Yi tyrannically ordered. This wasn't an ordinary poison, but a poisonous mosquito swarm. For large swarms of poisonous mosquito swarm. Being swept by them was more terrifying than being galloped by a large herd of antelopes. They would be covered in cuts and bruises. Han Yunqing admitted that she was timid. She shouted, "No, I'm scared." However, Long Fei Yi suddenly pulled her into his arms and coldly said, "With this prince here, you're not allowed to be scared." So domineering. So domineering. Han Yunqing hated arrogant, overbearing, and unreasonable men the most. However, at this moment, she didn't feel any disgust at all. Her heart thumped wildly, and she calmed down for no reason. This man's domineering aura gave people a sense of security. At this moment, the poisonous mosquito swarm from above, below, left, and right approached at the same time. "Are you ready?" Long Fei Yi asked in a low voice. After calming down, Han Yunqing brought out her professional standards and fully activated the scanning system. She constantly paid attention to the movements of the black swarm in all 4 directions. She also said in a low voice, "Ready." Chapter 47. Right at this moment, the venomous mosquito swarms that were flying towards them from all directions suddenly stopped. Han Yunqing knew that this was a sign that they were about to attack. She quickly scanned her surroundings and made a prompt decision. "Let's go." Sure enough, after a second of pause, the venomous mosquito swarmed towards them from all directions. In an instant, Long Fei Yi pressed his hand down and pulled Han Yunqing into his embrace. He raised his cloak and wrapped it tightly around her. Then, his figure flashed and turned into a lightning-fast figure, passing through the gap between 2 black shadows. A second faster was too fast, and a second slower was too slow. Just as Long Fei Yi passed through the narrow gap, the 4 swarms of venomous mosquito swarms merged into a large group and chased after them crazily. Long Fei Yi didn't stop and quickly flew up the cliff. The venomous mosquito swarms chased after them relentlessly. As they chased, the large group could even transform into the shape of a sharp arrow to increase their speed and attack. Han Yunqing was tightly wrapped in the cloak and not a single inch of her skin was exposed. However, she could hear the deafening buzzing sound, which meant that the venomous mosquito swarms were very close to them. Moreover, they were angry to make such loud noises. Han Yunqing really wanted to poke her head out to see what was going on. Were they almost at the cliff? However, just as she was thinking, her feet suddenly landed on the ground. "They're up." Han Yunqing was overjoyed. She struggled free from Long Fei Yi's arm and pulled down the cloak to take a look. In the abyss, a large group of venomous mosquito swarms were hovering around, not daring to come up. Not long after, they were gradually submerged in the abyss. Han Yunqing turned back to look at Long Fei Yi and smiled sweetly under the sunlight. "Long Fei Yi, you're amazing." Han Yunqing's back was facing the sunlight and her entire body was covered with a layer of faint golden glow. Her sweet smile was like a flower blooming in the sunlight. Long Fei Yi looked at her and time seemed to have stopped at this moment. However, he quickly threw out a sentence coldly. "Coward." Han Yunqing immediately stopped smiling. She pulled the corners of her mouth and rolled her eyes, too lazy to argue with him. The information that she had just scanned was still stored in the detoxification system. She was so frightened that she didn't have time to retrieve it. She turned around and closed her eyes to take a deep breath. The detoxification system was tied to her consciousness. If she was too messy, the detoxification system would also be messed up. "Have you figured out what poison it is?" Long Fei urged. He thought that Han Yunqing had only to see and smell it. Han Yunqing quickly organized her thoughts and turned around. She said in all seriousness, "Your Highness, congratulations. The 4 groups of poisonous mosquitoes are of the same type. They are called spider mosquitoes, which means that they carry the same venom. There is only one type of venom that is the same as the spider black widow's venom. It is commonly known as the widow's venom. She didn't know if Han Yunqing was lucky or if Long Fei Yi was lucky. Han Yunqing had studied these strange spider mosquitoes in the modern era. This was a very strange phenomenon. Mosquitoes and spiders had the same venom. Without a doubt, Han Yunqing's detoxification system had medicine. Not only did it have the antidote, it also had a special mosquito-killing liquid. Hearing Han Yunqing say this, Long Fei Yi nodded and asked, "How long do you need to make the antidote?" "Guess." Han Yunqing smiled. She was naturally in a good mood because she had medicine prepared. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi slowly narrowed his dangerous eyes. All right, no matter how good her mood was, she shouldn't joke with this iceberg. She would freeze to death. "I have it now," Han Yunqing said coldly. Seeing Long Fei Yi raise his eyebrows in disbelief, she snorted lightly and took out 2 bottles of spray medicine and a box of antidote from her medical bag. Long Fei Yi looked at this strange thing. His handsome brows furrowed even tighter, and he looked puzzled. Han Yunqing laughed inwardly. It was rare to see this iceberg with this kind of expression. She had to admit that his knitted brows were so charming. "This is the antidote. This is the mosquito-killing liquid. After taking the antidote, it will take effect for 2 hours. Even if you are bitten, you will be fine. It will only leave a wound. This liquid can kill those mosquitoes. Of course, if you don't mind being dirty, you can slap them to death." As Han Yunqing explained, she demonstrated it herself. With a light press, the liquid sprayed out, releasing a faint, fragrant scent. Long Fei Yi seriously listened and watched. Although this spray medicine was too unfamiliar to him, he quickly learned how to use it. Han Yunqing found for the first time that this man was the most charming when he was serious. Only, Long Fei Yi quickly recovered his expressionless face. "Where did you get these things?" "Widow's poison is a very common poison. Of course I have a backup," Han Yunqing calmly replied. Who cared if he believed it or not? "You prepared it so coincidentally?" Long Fei Yi asked again. Han Yunqing handed over the antidote. "Do you want it or not?" Long Fei Yi finally gave up. He took the antidote and casually handed the cloak to Han Yunqing. "I'm not cold anymore." "There's no need." Han Yunqing returned it. But Long Fei Yi stuffed it back. "This prince won't be responsible if you're disfigured." So when they just escaped, at that critical moment, he still cared about wrapping her up tightly, afraid that she would be bitten? Alright, if she was disfigured, he would lose face. She was once an ugly girl and had already lost face for him for several years. Han Yunqing ignored the warmth in her heart. After taking the antidote, she wrapped the cloak tightly around herself and put on the hood, covering most of her face. She had just finished tidying herself up when Long Fei Yi's strong arms wrapped around her. Just like the previous few times, he wrapped his arms around her small waist. Although they were separated by thick clothes, Han Yunqing could clearly feel the temperature of his palms. It was very, very hot. It was unimaginable that such a cold man actually had a pair of warm hands. The poisonous mosquitoes were indeed smarter than ordinary mosquitoes. Long Fei Yi had just brought Han Yunqing down the abyss when the 4 groups of poisonous mosquitoes once again surrounded them from 4 directions. This time round, their speed was even faster than before, as though they were specially waiting for them to come down. Who knew that not only did Long Fei Yi not avoid them, instead he flew towards the black mass of poisonous mosquitoes. Ah! Han Yunqing had not expected that this fellow would play in this way. Although she had immunity and had the protection of the anti-mosquito medication, but being drowned in the black mass of mosquitoes, Han Yunqing's heart still couldn't help but beat faster. It was too scary, too disgusting. Although she had wrapped her entire head with the cloak, but she could clearly feel a large swarm of mosquitoes flying towards her and crawling all over her body. The buzzing sound made her feel so stifled that she almost couldn't breathe. She didn't even bother to use the anti-mosquito medication. But very quickly, all the stifling feeling disappeared. Long Fei-yi carried her and speedily passed through the poisonous mosquito swarm, distancing themselves from them. Han Yunqing popped her head out and took in a deep breath of fresh air. She realized that the 4 groups of poisonous mosquitoes had already merged into one and were right in front of them. As though they had discovered that they were immune, the poisonous mosquito swarm wasn't as arrogant as before. Instead, they faced off against them and didn't move forward. Mosquitoes also have self-awareness. Han Yunqing joked. However, Long Fei-yi didn't say a word as he hugged her tightly and suddenly flew towards the poisonous mosquito swarm. This time round, he didn't just simply pass through but he stopped abruptly in front of the black fog and picked up the anti-mosquito medication to spray it. With this spray, a small piece of the black fog was immediately destroyed. The poisonous mosquitoes at the back were frightened and started to retreat. Seeing this, Han Yunqing was overjoyed. She also took out the anti-mosquito medication and sprayed it at the black fog. Every time she sprayed it, a piece of the black fog would be destroyed. She didn't know if the poisonous mosquitoes were scared silly as they stopped in mid-air and didn't escape. The more Han Yunqing sprayed it, the more excited she became. She reached into her medical bag, which was actually the detoxification system, and took out a bottle of spray medicine. With one bottle in her left hand and one in her right hand, she swept it with both hands, looking very dashing. Very quickly, a large piece of the black fog disappeared and the poisonous mosquitoes fell to the ground. Finally, the poisonous mosquitoes that had been invincible all this time reacted and ran for their lives. The black fog dissipated in an instant. Han Yunqing was overjoyed and laughed loudly. Korean-style ultimate kill. Long Fei-yi tilted his head and looked down disdainfully. He stared at her as if she was his prey. Han Yunqing only felt a chill on her scalp. She subconsciously raised her head and immediately met his deep gaze. She was slightly stunned and immediately restrained her smile. Smiling at someone who didn't know how to smile was simply a waste of her mood. Long Fei-yi retracted his gaze and didn't say anything. This abyss was sealed in the shape of an inverted V. It was surrounded by barren cliffs and could be seen at a glance. There was no way to hide anyone. Therefore, the spy from northernly country could only hide at the bottom of the abyss. Long Fei-yi brought Han Yunqing and swooped down without any obstacles. The bottom of the abyss was a barren pile of rocks and not a single blade of grass grew. They landed on the tallest rock. Long Fei-yi didn't let go of Han Yunqing from beginning to end. That pair of sharp black eyes coldly scanned the surroundings. Suddenly, a figure appeared out of thin air and landed on the rock opposite them. It was the northerly spy that Long Fei-yi wanted to capture. However, contrary to Han Yunqing's expectations, this spy was actually a woman. Moreover, it was a delicate woman. She wasn't tall, but her figure wasn't bad. Her curves were graceful and curvaceous. It could be said that she was the best of the best. Her facial features were delicate and beautiful, even softer than Murong Wanru's. Even if she didn't speak, she gave people a delicate feeling that she was too weak to stand up to a gust of wind. When encountering such a woman, not to mention men, even women would have an inexplicable desire to protect her. As soon as she appeared, her eyes were filled with tears as she pitifully pleaded, "Duke of Qin, this servant was wrong. This servant won't dare to do it again. Please spare this servant this time. Duke of Qin, please spare this servant. This servant will do whatever you want." Unfortunately, Long Fei-yi had never been a person who had tender feelings for the fairer sex. He didn't even waste words as he let go of Han Yunqing and drew his sword. Seeing that her pleas were useless, the female spy immediately turned hostile. Her malicious gaze swept past Han Yunqing as she immediately drew her sword and prepared to defend herself. Just as she was about to draw her sword, Han Yunqing whispered, "Be careful, her sword is poisoned." Long Fei-yi knew that he wouldn't suffer a second time after suffering once. If he had known earlier that this woman could use poison, he wouldn't have been careless and injured last time. Long Fei-yi, I'm very surprised that you were able to come down, but I guarantee that you won't be able to go back up again. As the female spy spoke, she didn't attack but turned to flee. Long Fei Yi raised his sword and chased after her. His speed was as fast as lightning, and he landed in front of the female spy in a moment. He was still that taciturn and didn't say a single word. He raised his sword and attacked. However, at this moment, the female spy suddenly dodged and blew an incomparably sharp whistle that resounded through the entire valley. Chapter 48. There was a long whistle. Suddenly, clouds of black fog appeared from all directions, covering the skies and covering the earth. It was as if they wanted to cover the entire sky. A poisonous mosquito swarm. She didn't expect there to be so many of them, and they all obeyed this woman. Han Yunqing was alarmed. She could actually control poisonous mosquitoes. No wonder this woman could hurt Long Fei Yi. She had some skills. The woman whistled again. Suddenly, all of the black fog surged towards Han Yunqing like a huge wave. Long Fei Yi, if you don't want that woman to die, you'd better protect my life, the female spy threatened as she retreated. She'd been hiding in Tianing country for so long, but she'd never seen Long Fei Yi touch a woman. He rarely even spoke to a woman, much less held one in his arms. Today, he'd actually brought this woman here and held her in his arms. Even in a life and death situation, she couldn't help but be astonished. Who was this woman? What kind of weight did she have in Long Fei Yi's heart? Just as the black mass was about to drown her, Han Yunqing glanced at Long Fei Yi and suddenly screamed, "Ah! I'm so scared. Too scary. Your Highness, save me. Hurry and save me. Sob sob, so disgusting, Your Highness, I'm so scared." She screamed as she flailed her arms and legs wildly. Long Fei Yi's eyes flashed with astonishment, but he quickly understood. His lips curved into a helpless smile that even he didn't notice. Seeing this, the female spy grew smug and gave a cold snort. "Long Fei Yi, I'm sure you've seen quite a few of your subordinates poisoned, right? Your Highness, she's threatening you." "How scary," Han Yunqing said anxiously. Long Fei had always wanted to end his battles quickly, even in the face of large-scale battles. He wouldn't waste any time on his enemies. However, in the face of the female spy's threat, he was surprisingly patient, which also made the female spy relax her vigilance and did not suspect Han Yunqing. She was full of confidence. She raised her eyebrows and sneered, "Long Fei Yi, if I die, she will die too. Also, you can forget about leaving this valley." Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi's patience is always limited. His handsome cold face showed displeasure. In an instant, the long sword was on the neck of the female spy. "You!" The female spy was shocked and angrily warned, "Long Fei Yi, have you thought it through?" Long Fei Yi finally opened his mouth, his tone cold and merciless. "This prince will let you die, with grievances." As soon as his voice fell, Han Yunqing very tacitly stopped, the corners of her lips hooked up into a sly smile. Seeing this, the female spy suddenly felt uneasy. Unfortunately, it was too late. She saw Han Yunqing take out 2 bottles of mosquito-killing agent. Like a princess in a fairy tale, she raised one leg and elegantly turned around on the spot. She also sprayed a circle of agent at the same time. She saw the circle of black shadows shrink back. The female spy was dumbstruck, not knowing what was in Han Yunqing's hands. Han Yunqing elegantly turned around a few more times and lightly waved her hand. Very quickly, the surrounding black shadows all retreated and quickly flowed away. The female spy was flustered and exasperated. She didn't care about the sword on her neck and hurriedly whistled. However, no matter how she whistled, it was useless. Compared to obeying orders, the poisonous mosquito wanted to save her life more. The female spy tried several times, but in the end, she was in despair. She looked at Han Yunqing in disbelief and asked, "You, what is that in your hands? Han Yunqing walked over, smiling with a harmless face. His Highness said that he wants you to die with everlasting regret. Sorry, I can't tell you. As soon as she finished speaking, Long Fei's sword no longer held back. With a light flick, he sent a splash of fresh blood into the air. The female spy fell to the ground, her eyes wide open. Even in death, she didn't know how Han Yunqing had driven away the mosquitoes. Han Yunqing squatted down and carefully scanned the long sword. She found that the poison on the sword was indeed the snake poison that Long Fei Yi had been poisoned by before. It seemed that this guy had been chasing this female spy for a long time. Previously, he asked her for the antidote because of this matter. The northernly country's spy knew how to use poison. Han Yunqing felt that this matter shouldn't be simple. You can tell that there's poison on her sword just by looking. Long Fei Yi asked in puzzlement. There were a lot of poisonous mosquitoes, and they also had a smell. Han Yunqing could smell it and it wasn't unbelievable. But, this long sword, Han Yunqing stood up and calmly said, I can smell it. If Long Fei Yi believed her, then he would be a fool. Coldly, he looked at her and didn't say a word. Han Yunqing helplessly shrugged her shoulders. Actually, since I was young, I've been gifted. I'm very sensitive to poison. It's a pity that my father and the rest don't know about it. As she spoke, she sighed. Sigh, if only my mother was still alive. How good would that be? Although this sentence was perfunctory, but when she said it, Han Yunqing's heart still felt a little sad. Perhaps, this was this body's instinctive reaction towards her mother. Or perhaps, since she was young, she had no one to rely on, so she longed for that maternal love. In her previous life, she didn't even know who her mother was. Now, although her mother was no longer around, she knew who she was and what kind of person she was. Occasionally, she could even hear legends about her. To her, this was already a very warm thing. Seeing Han Yunqing's sad look, a complicated look flashed past Long Fei Yi's eyes, but he didn't pursue the matter. After finding the secret military missive on the female spy's body, he took Han Yunqing with him and left. By the time they returned to the Duke of Qin's residence, it was already afternoon. The first thing Long Fei Yi did when he returned was to throw Han Yunqing a money pouch. Only then did Han Yunqing remember this. She didn't feel embarrassed as she openly took out a 300 taels banknote from Long Fei Yi's money pouch and laughed. Thanks, it's clear now. Long Fei Yi didn't reply as he turned around and left. Looking at his disappearing figure in the garden, Han Yunqing couldn't help but think, would this fellow stay over tonight? Or did he still have things to do? She subconsciously wrapped her clothes around herself and only then did she realize that his cloak was still with her. She originally wanted to chase after him, but on second thought, she decided to wash it clean before returning it to him. Seeing Han Yunqing return wrapped in a man's cloak, little Qin Xiang trotted over. Master, whose cloak is this? Where did you go? This servant couldn't find you this early in the morning. I went for a ride. Han Yunqing pocketed the 300 taels banknote, her mood exceptionally bright. This cloak. Little Qin Xiang still wanted to ask. Han Yunqing put her finger on her lips and made a shoot sound. Little Qin Xiang didn't dare to bother her anymore. The next evening, Han Yunqing went to deliver the cloak. She knocked on the door for a long time, but no one opened it. She pushed the door and realized that the door wasn't locked. Did that fellow not have a habit of locking the door? Or was it too safe here? Han Yunqing walked in and realized that everything was still the same as before, clean and decent. However, that iceberg really wasn't there. Perhaps the Duke of Qin's residence was just a place for him to sleep. After leaving the cloak in the study, Han Yunqing didn't know why, but she couldn't help but sigh softly before shrugging her shoulders and leaving. Over the past few days, she hadn't been idle. She'd added a few medicine cabinets and bookshelves to the leisurely Cloud Pavilion study, as well as bought a few medical books to read to fill in the gaps in her detox system. Although she wasn't idle, her days were still comfortable. Still, she had no idea that Long Fei Yi, Grand Concubine Yi, or even the other mistresses of the imperial harem were all secretly investigating her. Her father, Han Kongan, had not only been summoned by the Empress Dowager, but Long Fei as well. Because of this, Han Kongan had to repeatedly search through Han Yunqing's rooms before she got married, hoping to find any clues. Master, it's all been investigated. It's confirmed that the one at Leisurely Cloud Pavilion is the real Han Yunqing. Before she got married, the Han family's servant girls and 2 young misses all saw her put on a red veil and put on a bridal sedan chair. From the Han estate to the Duke of Qin's estate, they passed through the city and through the streets, so it was impossible to do anything. That night, the wedding nanny was on guard as well, Chu Shifeng reported in detail. Did she treat the poison on her face in the bridal sedan chair? Long Fei Yi asked. There was a scar before she got on the sedan chair, but it was gone after she got off. Chu Shifeng paused before adding, Master, if esteemed Wang Fei could treat Princess Changping's poison with a single bowl of medicine, I don't think it'd be difficult for her to do it. Since she has both talent and looks, why hide it and let others roll their eyes at her? Long Fei Yi asked again. Actually, he had no interest in Han Yunqing in the past. No matter what kind of person she was, whether she was beautiful or not, this woman had been forced on him by the Empress Dowager and Emperor. She'd never enter his eyes. He was even planning to chase her out of the hibiscus courtyard on their wedding night and send her to a side palace in the suburbs to be put under house arrest forever. But Han Yunqing had saved him on their wedding night. Afterwards, she displayed medical skills in her way of handling matters, giving him surprise after surprise. Your Highness, it's better to be a fool than to be clever. As this subordinate sees it, if esteemed Wang Fei had revealed her talent and looks, she might not have been able to marry you, Chu Shifeng said with a smile. These words made it sound like Han Yunqing really wanted to marry Long Fei Yi. All of her forbearance was for the sake of marrying him. At least, that was what Long Fei Yi heard. Long Fei Yi looked over expressionlessly, but Chu Shifeng wasn't afraid of death. He actually said, Master, as this subordinate sees it, esteemed Wang Fei likes you. This subordinate, but before he could finish, Long Fei Yi's cold gaze darkened. Chu Shifeng shuddered and tactfully shut his mouth. The ignorant Han Yunqing was living very comfortably, but good days were always short-lived. Just when she thought that Grand Concubine Yi would be quiet for a while because of Princess Changping, an unexpected problem came knocking on her door. It made it impossible for Grand Concubine Yi to have peace. Master, someone's come to ask for medical treatment again. They can't enter our estate, so they're waiting outside. I heard it's the 3rd Madam of Duke Xingua, little Chen Xiang reported, panting for breath. It wasn't clear who started the rumors, but news of Han Yunqing curing Mu Qinggu spread like wildfire. Moreover, the more they spread, the more ridiculous the rumors became. They said she was modest and low-key, not useless trash, but a once-in-a-century genius. Using all kinds of fictitious deeds, they made her sound as if she was the reincarnation of Hua Tuo. Difficult and complicated diseases that the imperial physicians and various divine doctors could not treat were all easily solved by her. Just a bowl of medicine would be effective. Aside from that, there were even rumors that she was a benevolent divine doctor who didn't accept medical fees. Instead, she prioritized treating the poor first. As a result, since last night, many family members of patients had heard the news and rushed over. Whether they were high-ranking officials, imperial relatives, or ordinary citizens, they all ran over to seek medical treatment. The rumors had raised Han Yunqing so high and shaped her image so well. Now that a patient had come to seek medical treatment, she had to either clarify that she had no talent and become a laughingstock, or make a house call. If she refused, she'd be the subject of gossip. Everything had happened too suddenly. To create such a big headline in the capital's circle of public opinion, it wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Without a doubt, the person behind the scenes wanted to kill her by flattering her. Their intentions were too sinister to give her such a difficult problem. Chapter 49. Mistress, what do we do? Little Qin Xiang was anxious when an attendant came to report. Esteemed Wang Fei, Grand Imperial Concubine wants you to come over immediately. Han Yunqing pursed her lips. When it rains, it pours. If she hoped that Grand Imperial Concubine Yi could help her get through this crisis, then she was overthinking things. As soon as she entered, Grand Imperial Concubine Yi showered her with curses. Han Yunqing, you don't feel comfortable if you don't show off your skills? Mu Fei has misunderstood. Yunxi wouldn't go to the extent of asking for trouble, Han Yunqing replied mildly. Asking for trouble? I think you're the one looking for trouble. You've already made a name for yourself. There's no one in or out of the palace who doesn't know of your skills, Han Yunqing. Do you know that I'm about to die from all the noise from those people? Grand Imperial Concubine Yi raged. Many of those who came to seek treatment were of lowly status and couldn't even enter the Duke of Qin's gates. Grand Imperial Concubine Yi had rejected all of the high-ranking officials and nobles for now. After all, the Duke of Qin's estate wasn't a clinic and Qin Wangfei wasn't a doctor. If it was those nobles who were on good terms with Grand Imperial Concubine Yi, perhaps she'd let Han Yunqing take a look. But at this critical juncture, the rumors had spread throughout the city. Once there was a precedent, things would get out of hand. But if all of this hadn't happened at the gates of the Duke of Qin's estate, then it'd be a different story. Grand Imperial Concubine Yi had long made plans in her heart. Mu Fei is an intelligent person. She should be able to tell that someone's spreading rumors to kill Yunxi, Han Yunqing replied seriously. Grand Imperial Concubine Yi snorted disdainfully, a calculating look in her eyes. I don't care so much. Tell me how to deal with it right now. As she spoke, the guard ran to the gates to report again. Seeing this, Grand Imperial Concubine Yi pretended to be angry and slapped the table. Han Yunqing, look for yourself. I'm telling you now, if you don't give me an explanation today, move out of the Duke of Qin's estate immediately. Move out of the Duke of Qin's estate. Han Yunqing immediately understood. Grand Imperial Concubine Yi didn't find the people who came to seek treatment annoying at all. She clearly despised her as a troublesome daughter-in-law and wanted to take advantage of the situation to kick her out. Han Yunqing finally understood. No matter how much face she'd given Grand Concubine Yi, it was all in vain. Her fault lay not in the trouble she'd caused, but in her status. If it was Murong Wanru who ran into trouble today, Grand Concubine Yi's personality would definitely ferret out the culprit and strike back viciously. However, she was just an outsider's daughter-in-law, a daughter-in-law who was not to her liking. The two of them were destined to be enemies. Perhaps today's rumors were a trap set up by Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru. Since that was the case, there was no need for her to force herself to endure and greet him with a smile. Han Yunqing sneered, Mu Fei, are you trying to separate from the family? I can't make the decision on such an important matter. You should discuss it with His Highness. Wherever Long Fei Yi lived, she would live there. Husband and wife sang the same tune. She didn't even hesitate to kick down the bridal sedan chair door to marry into the Duke of Qin's mansion. How could she leave so easily? If she left, how many people would gossip about her behind her back? How long could she live peacefully? This marriage was bestowed by the Empress Dowager and decreed by the Emperor. Even Long Fei Yi couldn't chase her away without sufficient reasons, much less Grand Concubine Yi. Separate from the family? Hearing these words, Grand Concubine Yi gave a start. On one side, Murong Wanru was gaping as well. She never thought Han Yunqing would dare to say such things. Grand Concubine Yi treasured the Duke of Qin as much as her own life. As soon as the late emperor passed away, she used the excuse of being bored in the palace to move to the Duke of Qin's estate. Han Yunqing, this outsider daughter-in-law, actually dared to say she wanted to separate from the family? Slap! With a loud crash, Grand Concubine Yi lost all reason and slammed the table. Han Yunqing, what did you say just then? Explain it clearly to me. I said, if Mufei wants to separate from the family, then go talk to His Highness. Qinxia can't make the decision. Qinxia still has matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave first. Han Yunqing said coldly before turning to leave. Rebellion, rebellion. Someone come, stop her for me. Grand Concubine Yi raged. A few guards immediately stepped forward to stop her. Han Yunqing, you dare to talk to me about separating from the family? What right do you have to do that? Fei will never agree to it. You think too highly of yourself. Do you want to rebel? Grand Concubine Yi raged. Mufei, I'm wrongly accused. Han Yunqing shouted. It's your idea to separate from the family, not mine. You can't wrong me like this. What? Grand Concubine Yi's heart felt stifled as she almost fainted. You woman, how can you lie through your teeth? When did I say anything? Mufei wants me to move out. Could it be that you want me to move out by myself? Won't the Duke of Qin come with me? Han Yunqing asked seriously. Grand Concubine Yi grew agitated at these words and didn't know how to retort. Han Yunqing looked like she'd suddenly realized something as she exclaimed, Mufei, you don't really want me to move out by myself, do you? Mufei, ever since I married into the family, I've never been lecherous, respectful, talkative, thieving, jealous, or ill. I'm also doing my best to give His Highness an heir. Why do you want to chase me away? Han Yunqing really hadn't committed any of the 7 crimes of divorcing a wife, being childless, lecherous, talkative, thieving, jealous, and ill. Grand Concubine Yi wanted to chase her away from the bottom of her heart. She was about to speak up when Murong Wanru rushed over to cut her off. Sister-in-law, it's a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. You've really wronged Mufei. It wasn't a big deal to begin with, so why are you thinking so much? As she spoke, she shot a look at the fuming Grand Concubine Yi and helped her sit down. Sister-in-law, Mufei's meaning is for you to stay in a courtyard in the suburbs for a few days. So many people have come to see you these past 2 days, so it's not good to take them all to the Duke of Qin's estate. It's also not good to refuse them all, is it? Murong Wanru offered Grand Concubine Yi a cup of tea as she patted her chest. Mufei, don't be angry. How can sister-in-law set her heart at ease if you hurt your body? Sister-in-law has misunderstood your intentions. I'll talk to sister-in-law. She'll understand and agree for sure. Grand Concubine Yi nodded. She'd weathered the winds and rains of the palace for so many years, so she wasn't the type to lose her cool. She'd already discussed this with Wanru to trick Han Yunqing into moving to another courtyard. Once she moved out, it'd be difficult to get her back. Still, Han Yunqing's mention of splitting up the family was enough to make her lose all reason. Fei was her only source of pride and support. He was her only hope for the rest of her life. No matter who it was, they shouldn't even think of kidnapping her son away. Han Yunqing looked at Murong Wanru with a cold smile in her heart. She had to praise this white lotus for being good with words. After pacifying Grand Concubine Yi, Murong Wanru pulled Han Yunqing to sit down on one side. Han Yunqing sat down as well. She only wanted to scare Grand Concubine Yi a little, but she didn't really want to have a falling out with her. Arguing with the old and young was the stupidest thing to do. Even if you were reasonable and the other party was purposely making things difficult for you, in the end, they'd label you as unfilial and impolite. It'd all be your fault. Murong Wanru was patient enough to give Han Yunqing a cup of tea as well. Sister-in-law, calm down, calm down. Mufei's meaning is for you to stay in another courtyard for a few days first. You can treat patients while thinking of a countermeasure. I won't let you stay here forever as a doctor. What do you mean by separating the family? No wonder Mufei's angry. Even if Big Brother heard it, he'd get mad at you too. In the end, it became Han Yunqing's fault. Murong Bailianhua was really something. At this rate, was she supposed to apologize to Grand Concubine Yi and accept their arrangements to stay in another courtyard? Murong Wanru had good methods, but Han Yunqing wasn't so easy to fool around with. She avoided the argument and got straight to the point. I saved the young general and princess because I just happened to know how to treat the poison in their bodies. I can't afford to wear the hat of a saintly and benevolent heart. I'll go clarify things right now. Han Yunqing rose to leave as she spoke. If someone cursed her as a good-for-nothing to her face, she'd definitely retort. But there was no need for her to let the world know she was a genius for no reason. Even the heavens were jealous of heroic talents, to say nothing of the masses. So be it. She didn't want to climb that high. Grand Concubine Yi grew anxious again and raged, "Stop right there. Aren't you just going to make a fool of yourself? Mu Fei, you couldn't have misunderstood as well, right? I'm not a doctor, so I don't know how to treat illnesses. I only dabble in detoxification, that's all. If you force me to treat someone and they die, wouldn't that be even more shameful?" Han Yunqing said seriously. Both Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru were left speechless. Murong Wanru's eyes flashed with sinister hatred. She was the one who'd spread the rumors. First, she could use this chance to chase Han Yunqing out of the Duke of Qin's estate. Second, she could tamper with Han Yunqing's patience and pin the crime of causing someone's death. It was a plot to kill two birds with one stone, but Han Yunqing had broken through it with a few words. Murong Wanru couldn't accept it. She put on a helpless expression and gave a long sigh. Sister-in-law, medicine and poison aren't separated. You're too modest. With the rumors spreading like wildfire, if you go clarify things, people might think you're aloof and virtuous. There are still some nobles out there. With Big Brother here, we don't have to worry about offending them. It's just that. Murong Wanru trailed off as she trailed off. It's just what? Grand Concubine Yi asked seriously. Murong Wanru glanced at Han Yunqing helplessly. It's just that sister-in-law still represents Big Brother. If you disappoint the people, I'm afraid it'll affect Big Brother's position in their hearts. That's the most important thing, Long Fei Yi held a high position and power. Even the emperor had to yield to him, not only because of the power he held, but also because of the prestige he'd held in the hearts of Tianning citizens. Murong Wanru's words had hit the nail on the head. Still, Han Yunqing was amused. Even if Murong Wanru hadn't brought up Long Fei Yi, she would have. It was best to push this kind of trouble onto Long Fei Yi. She said, "Wanru's words are very true. I don't dare to make a decision on my own either. It's better to discuss things with His Highness before making a decision." Grand Concubine Yi had already given up hope that she couldn't force Han Yunqing to move out. Now that she mentioned Long Fei Yi, she grew cautious. She didn't want to go for wool and come home shorn, which would affect her son's reputation. "Someone go to the hibiscus courtyard and tell the Duke of Qin to hurry back. Just say I have urgent matters," Grand Concubine Yi ordered. Seeing this, Murong Wanru took a deep breath. She knew she'd lost thoroughly. Chapter 50. Han Yunqing assumed that Long Fei wouldn't return so soon, but he didn't leave the house at all. He was still in the hibiscus courtyard, and as soon as a servant went to report his arrival, Long Fei arrived. As soon as that tall and proud figure appeared in the doorway, both Murong Wanru and the other servant girls flushed red. They were both nervous and excited, their hearts pounding wildly. They wanted to steal a glance at him, but didn't dare. He was dressed in loose white robes, his ink-black hair tied up with an ink-black jade hairpin. He looked like an emotionless immortal from the 9 heavens, handsome and extraordinary, aloof and otherworldly. Even Grand Concubine Yi couldn't take her eyes off him. Having a son like this was the happiest thing in her life. But Han Yunqing only silently rolled her eyes. This fellow's attire made it obvious that he lived at home. Even as the true head of the house, he was still able to keep his composure despite such a big incident. She couldn't help but admire him. Grand concubine Yi happily pulled Long Fei Yi to sit on the couch and told him the story with embellishments. She made it sound like Han Yunqing was the one who'd provoked them. Han Yunqing looked down and thought to herself, Long Fei Yi, if you don't take care of this, I won't make house calls next time even if it's 3,000 taels. But she'd hardly thought this when Long Fei Yi tossed her a cold question. Han Yunqing, how do you think we should handle this? Qinxia is slow-witted. May your highness make the decision. Han Yunqing was very humble. If you're slow-witted, then think it over carefully, Long Fei Yi said next. Han Yunqing steeled her heart and said, as Qinxia sees it, a clarification is necessary. The key is how and who will do it. Grand concubine Yi and Murong Wanru didn't take her words to heart, but Long Fei Yi nodded and indicated for her to continue. Seeing this, both mother and daughter looked over in disbelief. Han Yunqing said seriously, in this concubine's humble opinion, it would be most convincing if imperial concubine mother came forward to clarify the matter. After all, imperial concubine mother was the one who rejected them previously. Moreover, there was no lack of nobles who came to seek medical treatment. Even if his mother were to appear, they would not dare to have any objections. As for the commoners, this concubine suggests that imperial concubine mother give each of them a sum of money to treat their illness so that they can find another famous doctor. Firstly, it will show imperial concubine mother's benevolence, and secondly, it will not give people a reason to gossip. She actually wanted Grand Concubine Yi to solve the problem herself? Murong Wanru covered her mouth in disbelief. She thought, Han Yunqing, you're indulging in the wildest fantasies. Just wait to be humiliated. I'm showing myself. Grand Concubine Yi was a little unhappy. Han Yunqing added, Mufei, you're the most suitable person to represent His Highness. As she spoke, she looked at Long Fei Yi. Your Highness, don't you agree? This guy was supposed to be her backer, but Han Yunqing was forcing him to open his mouth. Long Fei Yi's eyes flashed with unnoticed admiration before he nodded openly. Although Grand Concubine Yi doted on her son, he had never been close to her. Now that he was older, they were even less close. Especially in the past few years, it was rare for them to have a proper conversation and eat a meal together. Seeing her son nod, Grand Concubine Yi felt as sweet as honey in her heart. She didn't bother arguing with Han Yunqing anymore. All right. Someone come, prepare the silver. I'll go take care of things right now. Grand Concubine Yi was about to leave when she turned back. Fei, just eat dinner at my place. It's been a long time since you ate with Mufei. She didn't wait for Long Fei Yi to reply, but quickly ordered Murong Wanru to take care of things. Murong Wanru wanted to stay a bit longer, but had no choice but to leave unwillingly. After everyone left, only Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqing were left in the guest hall. Han Yunqing silently exhaled in relief. This calamity had finally passed. The person who spread the rumors better not let her find out, or else don't blame her poison doctor for turning into a poison hand. She stole a glance at Long Fei Yi. Whether it was using this guy's name to intimidate others, or inviting him out in person, it was all very useful. While Han Yunqing was laughing up her sleeve, Long Fei Yi said mildly, You've improved, what? Han Yunqing didn't hear him clearly. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi wasn't planning to say it a second time. He stood up and walked towards the door, his back cold and lonely. Han Yunqing felt like he was right in front of her eyes, but also far away on the horizon. She chased after him and stood by the door, shouting, Hey, I sent that cloak to your study. Did you see it? Han Yunqing assumed that this guy would ignore her, but he actually turned around and nodded his head. Han Yunqing gave a start before saying, Oh. She didn't know why, but she suddenly broke into a silly smile. A moment later, Long Fei Yi was long gone before Han Yunqing realized that something was off. Didn't Grand Concubine Yi want him to stay for dinner? He actually left without a word. Han Yunqing coughed lightly a few times. Seeing that no one was around, she hastily slipped out the door. Grand Concubine Yi hadn't asked her to stay, so what was she waiting for now that Long Fei Yi was gone? Letting Grand Concubine Yi stand her up was purely Long Fei Ye's business. By the time Han Yunqing slipped back to the hibiscus courtyard, the lights in Long Fei Ye's quarters were already on. That meant he was inside. Would this guy be spending the night in his quarters tonight? How many days had he been back? Where did he spend his nights outside? How did he do it? Han Yunqing thought of a bunch of questions before realizing that she was bored. Why was she so curious about these things? He had his territory, she had her leisurely cloud pavilion. Well, water didn't interfere with river water. She shrugged her shoulders and turned to head for the leisurely cloud pavilion. Chen Xiang had already prepared a fragrant meal for her. As soon as she reached the door, Han Yunqing could smell the blissful scent of food. But she'd hardly stepped through the doors when an attendant reported from behind her. Esteemed Wang Fei, Grand Concubine Yi wants you to come over immediately. Han Yunqing exhaled and asked coldly, what's the matter? This subordinate isn't clear. Grand Concubine Yi has also summoned His Highness. I don't think it's a small matter, the attendant replied honestly. Han Yunqing didn't think much of it. What could Grand Concubine Yi possibly want? She didn't even need to mention the trouble at the door. Grand Concubine Yi had the intelligence and wisdom to deal with it herself. Even Long Fei Yi had been summoned. It looked like it had to be a matter of letting Grand Concubine Yi stand her up. Right away. Han Yunqing said mildly. As soon as the attendant left, she continued through the doors. She wanted to eat a few mouthfuls to fill her stomach before going over. She'd definitely go hungry at a family banquet. Han Yunqing had arrived late, but things had gone completely beyond her expectations. Long Fei Yi had arrived long ago, but there was an extra person in Grand Concubine Yi's guest hall, Tianing Country's Emperor Tianhui's personal eunuch, Eunuch Shui. Everyone looked towards Han Yunqing as soon as they entered, making the already restless Han Yunqing even more nervous. The eunuch by the emperor's side came to visit. No matter what it was related to the emperor. Seeing Grand Concubine Yi and Long Fei Ye's expressions, Han Yunqing's heart grew uneasy. Nothing good could come of this. This servant, Shui Guiping, pays respects to esteemed Wang Fei. Eunuch Shui's face was all smiles as he spoke in a strange tone. Eunuch Shui must take offense. You may rise, Han Yunqing said politely. Eunuch Shui wasn't any ordinary servant. Eunuch Shui, have a seat, Grand Concubine Yi said. Since Grand Concubine Yi had spoken, Eunuch Shui didn't stand on ceremony and sat down on one side. Seeing this, Han Yunqing found a seat by Long Fei Ye's side and sat down as well. Yunxi, explain to Eunuch Shui yourself. You don't have any medical skills, only detoxification. Otherwise, Eunuch Shui won't be able to report back, Grand Concubine Yi said calmly. At these words, Han Yunqing's heart almost stopped. Could it be that the emperor heard the rumors and wanted to find her to treat his illness as well? Though her heart was flustered, Han Yunqing remained calm on the surface. Eunuch Shui, what's going on? To reply, esteemed Wang Fei, the emperor heard that your medical skills are exceptional and can treat illnesses that imperial physician Gu and divine Dr. Han couldn't. That's why he had this old servant invite you into the palace to take His Highness Crown Prince's pulse, Eunuch Shui said politely. Han Yunqing's mouth twitched. Take his pulse, these 3 words were said so lightly. The Crown Prince was the Empress and Empress Dowager's treasure. He was the heir apparent that the emperor had raised with his own hands, but 7 years ago he'd contracted a strange illness. Han Kongan had volunteered to treat him, but after 7 years of treatment, he still hadn't been able to diagnose the cause. Han Kongan had spent a great deal of effort and owed many favors, seeking out many directors of the medical academy for consultation, but none of them had been able to cure him. There were plenty of incurable illnesses in the world, but Han Kongan had taken the Crown Prince's pulse as one of pregnancy. How could a grown man have a pulse of pregnancy? Everyone thought it was a misdiagnosis, but the directors of the medical academy all agreed that it was a pulse of pregnancy. This made the Empress Dowager furious. Because of this, she bore a grudge against the Han family. She even ignored Lady Tianxin's life-saving grace and wanted to kill Han Kongan multiple times. Naturally, this matter was kept a secret. Only the Emperor, Empress Dowager, Empress, the Duke of Qin, Han Kongan, Imperial Physician Gu, and a few directors of the medical academy knew. Everyone else only knew that the Crown Prince had contracted a strange illness. As for what it was, that was nothing but rumors. The directors of the medical academy left, but Han Kongan suffered a tragedy. In fact, the medical academy's directors had already consulted, but there were no results. The Empress Dowager and Emperor knew that even if they invited others, there wouldn't be any results. Thus, they let Han Kongan continue the treatment to prevent the matter from leaking out. From then on, all the anger was placed on Han Kongan alone. Han Yunqing knew this from the original owner's memory. The original owner had accidentally overheard it. Now, the Emperor actually wanted her to take the pulse. Could it be that he wanted her daughter to take over her father's business and replace Han Kongan? Eunuch Shui, it's a big misunderstanding. Han Yunqing suddenly stood up with an anxious face. Eunuch Shui, although the Han family is a medical family, I was born slow-witted and don't have any medical skills. This is something that everyone knows. Your Majesty, did you hear the rumors outside and misunderstand me? Eunuch Shui smiled. Wang Fei Nyang Nyang is really modest. As the saying goes, there's no smoke without fire. Wang Fei Nyang Nyang must have the ability for the people outside to spread such rumors. It's a misunderstanding. My Mufei just went out to clarify it. Han Yunqing wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Who knew that Eunuch Shui would say, Wang Fei Nyang Nyang, even if the rumors outside are a misunderstanding, can the truth be trusted? The Emperor has heard about the young general's matter and Princess Changping's matter. Imperial Physician Gu and Divine Dr. Han both examined the young general and Princess Changping's illness, but they couldn't see the cause. You cured the illness in half a day. When the Emperor heard this, his imperial countenance was filled with joy and praised you for surpassing your master. You're just like your mother, Lady Tianxin, in the past. Eunuch Shui was overjoyed as he spoke, but Han Yunqing's heart was broken. Wang Fei Nyang Nyang, this time it was the Empress who personally recommended you. Wang Fei Nyang Nyang really hid her strength well. If you continue to be modest, be careful of the imperial countenance becoming angry. Eunuch Shui said half-jokingly. The Empress. What was called flattery to death? This was true flattery to death. What did the rumors outside count for? Han Yunqing sat back down, finally understanding. She inadvertently glanced at Grand Concubine Yi's face and saw the mocking smile on her lips. She seemed to be waiting to see a good show. By her side, Murong Wanru looked sympathetic, but her eyes were filled with schadenfreude. Chapter 51. Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru were both eager for Han Yunqing to disappoint the Emperor and be severely punished. It'd be best if she was crippled so she never came back. Murong Wanru, in particular, was the one who'd spread the rumors this time. Her original plan was to chase Han Yunqing out of the Duke of Qin's estate, but it ended up alarming the Emperor instead. It was best if the Emperor came to deal with this woman. The Emperor had forced Long Fei Yi to marry her, so he personally crippled her. What could be more satisfying than that? Han Yunqing couldn't help but glance towards Long Fei Yi, only to see him as lofty and aloof as ever. His expression was cold and distant, making him seem frighteningly unfamiliar. In his heart, he was probably rejoicing in her misfortune as well. He'd love to get rid of her official consort title as well. Esteemed Wang Fei, it's too late today. His Majesty had this servant come to say hello and have you rest well. Tomorrow morning, this servant will come to pick you up. Eunuch Shui stood up as he spoke. Grand Concubine Yi hastened to follow suit. Eunuch Shui, it's rare for you to come back. Have a meal before you leave. Many thanks for esteemed Wang Fei's good intentions, but this old servant still has to return to report. Esteemed Wang Fei, Your Highness Duke of Qin, farewell. Eunuch Shui didn't forget to remind Han Yunqing, esteemed Wang Fei, don't delay tomorrow morning. His Majesty wants to see you after morning court. I'll remember. Take care, Eunuch Shui. Han Yunqing was natural and unrestrained, a smile on her face. But her heart was cold. A man with a pregnancy pulse. Leaving aside the ancient times, this was a strange story even in modern times. She might even be able to treat serious illnesses, to say nothing of a strange ailment. Han Yunqing could ignore the rumors outside, but she couldn't ignore the emperor's expectations. Judging from Eunuch Shui's words, Emperor Tianhui had high hopes for her medical skills. If she refused, she'd be giving him no face. But if she didn't refuse and couldn't treat him, then the emperor's mood would dictate the outcome. Supposedly, Emperor Tianhui had a bad temper. The empress had even added fuel to the fire behind the scenes. If she couldn't treat him, then the consequences would be obvious. After sending imperial physician Shui Wei, Grand Concubine Yi acted as if nothing had happened as she urged, Wanru, hurry and call for the meal. Your big brother must be hungry. She was in a good mood as she glanced at Han Yunqing. It was rare for her to be so good-natured. Yunxi, you should eat at Mu Fei's place too. Once you're full, go back and sleep. You mustn't wake up late tomorrow morning. Although Han Yunqing's heart had turned cold, she still smiled and nodded. Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru wanted to laugh at her, right? She wouldn't let them. At the table, Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru were both attentive. They kept giving Long Fei Yi food and soup, but Long Fei Yi didn't eat much. He didn't say a word from beginning to end. Han Yunqing, who was completely ignored, lowered her eyes and focused on eating and drinking soup. Forget it. Whether it's a blessing or a curse, I can't avoid it. I'll just play it by ear tomorrow. Han Yunqing ate and drank well. She thought she'd be able to sleep well, too, but she tossed and turned all night. She simply got up and wrapped herself in a blanket to lean against the window and stare blankly. But by chance, she discovered that the lights in Long Fei Ye's quarters were still on. It's so late, but that guy's still awake. Why can't he sleep? She didn't know why, but his words suddenly popped up in her head. With your lordship here, I won't allow you to be afraid. In a flash, Han Yunqing had an impulse to run over and ask him if he could accompany her one more time like last time when she went to the palace to pay her respects. But when she recalled his icy silence, her bright eyes dimmed. Forget it. Taking a deep breath, Han Yunqing shut the window and told herself that it's no big deal. Don't be afraid. Even though she didn't sleep all night, Han Yunqing still got up very early the next morning. She had little Chen Xiang dress her up meticulously, making her look especially spirited. Since it was something she couldn't avoid, then she'd face it head-on. Han Yunqing told herself that she had to not only do it bravely, but work hard to do it well. Eunuch Shui came to welcome her, as did Grand Concubine Yi and Murong Wanru. On one hand, they were giving Eunuch Shui face. On the other hand, they were here to see her make a fool of herself. Seeing them smile at her, Han Yunqing looked even prettier. She was the type of person who wouldn't shed a tear even if she saw a coffin, so how could they laugh at her? Before boarding the carriage, Han Yunqing glanced back, but didn't see any sign of Long Fei Yi. By the time she left the hibiscus courtyard, the lights in his quarters had long been extinguished and the doors shut. He was still asleep, so he wouldn't come. By the time they reached the palace, Emperor Tianhui had already left court and was waiting in the imperial study. The long corridor leading to the study was more serene than any other place in the palace. Before long, one could see court ladies and eunuchs standing on either side of the corridor, unmoving like statues. Amidst the silence, Han Yunqing and Eunuch Shui's footsteps were especially obvious. Esteemed Wang Fei, walk faster. His Majesty hates waiting for people, Eunuch Shua urged in a low voice. Even in the corridor, he spoke very carefully. Such a solemn atmosphere made the already apprehensive Han Yunqing even more nervous. From what she understood, Emperor Tianhui could be considered half a tyrant with a violent temper. When he killed someone, he didn't even crease an eyebrow. Soon enough, they arrived at the imperial study. Eunuch Shua stopped outside the door and murmured, "Esteemed Wang Fei, you can go in by yourself." Even Eunuch Shua didn't have the right to know about the crown prince's affairs, so he was very self-aware. Before Han Yunqing could react, he raised his voice and shouted, reporting. "Qin Wang Fei has arrived." At these words, Han Yunqing had no choice but to hurry inside. This was her first time here, so she only felt that the atmosphere was frighteningly solemn. She didn't know any etiquette, nor did she know where to go, so she simply walked straight ahead. But this place was damn silent, many times quieter than outside. It made her feel like her footsteps were guilty. Finally, Han Yunqing saw a large curtain of beads in front of her. She could faintly make out a person standing by a desk inside. Was Emperor Tianhui there? Han Yunqing's heart skipped a beat. She clenched her fists before walking in with her head bowed. She carefully lifted a corner of the bead curtain, only to be met with a gaze as sharp as an eagle's. Instantly, Han Yunqing felt murderous intent rising from all sides. "You're Qin Wang Fei, Han Yunqing." Emperor Tianhui's voice was cold. He was in his 40s and had a goatee. His face was as cold as the king of hell, imposing without being angry. Unlike Long Fei Ye's coldness, which was cold and detached, Long Fei Ye's coldness was aloof, emotionless, and lofty. Emperor Tianhui's coldness was stern and fiendish. Han Yunqing might have been nervous, but she was still able to keep her composure. She gracefully bowed in greeting. "To reply, Your Majesty, Qinxie is Qin Wang Fei, Han Yunqing." But Emperor Tianhui suddenly said sternly, "Who allowed you to come in so casually? Who allowed you to come in?" At these words, Han Yunqing froze in place. She was a transmigrator who only knew basic etiquette. How could she know the many rules of the imperial study? Moreover, hadn't Eunuch Shue just announced her arrival and told her to come in? Han Yunqing bowed, unable to figure out where she'd gone wrong. For a moment, she didn't know whether to answer or stay silent. Although she was designated as Qin Wang Fei, in the emperor's eyes, Han Yunqing was nothing more than a lowly commoner. Just as Han Yunqing was feeling awkward, a familiar voice spoke up from the side. "Imperial brother, she's an uneducated woman to begin with. There's no need to bicker with her. Proper business is more important." The deep voice carried its own magnetism, cold enough to make one shiver. Although it was full of ridicule, Han Yunqing felt an inexplicable warmth in her ears. "It's him, Long Fei Yi." She unconsciously raised her head and looked towards the source of the voice, only to see Long Fei Yi dressed in brocade palace robes. He was handsome and noble as he sat at a tea table on the side, slowly sipping from a steaming cup of hot tea. This guy actually came, and even arrived before her. Seeing him sitting there so calm and composed, Han Yunqing felt like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. She inexplicably exhaled in relief. Did he come because of her? A wild hope rose in Han Yunqing's heart that even she hadn't thought of. Without a doubt, Long Fei Ye's words carried weight. Emperor Tianhui looked over without a word, but waved a hand to indicate that Han Yunqing should rise. It was a long time later that Han Yunqing found out that even the empress had to bow outside the beaded curtains when she came to the imperial study. She could only enter the inner chambers with the emperor's permission. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Han Yunqing rose to her feet, sneaking a grateful glance towards Long Fei Yi. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi didn't look at her. Although she was his younger sister-in-law, there was still a difference between monarch and subject. Moreover, she couldn't enter the emperor's eyes at all. Long Fei Yi could sit, but Han Yunqing could only stand. Zhen heard the empress say that Mu Qinggu was in a coma and Changping had moss. All the doctors were helpless, but you cured them with a single prescription. Emperor Tianhui got straight to the point, looking disdainfully at Han Yunqing from above. He didn't see her as his younger sister-in-law at all. To reply, Your Majesty, there really is such a thing. But strictly speaking, the young general and Princess Changping weren't sick, but poisoned. Qinxia knows how to treat poisons, not treat illnesses. No matter what, Han Yunqing had to tell the truth. She could try to see the crown prince, but she had to be honest before that. But the emperor only said, medicine and poison are one family. Zhen heard your mother say in the past that all illnesses are caused by poisons. Do you understand this logic? Cough, cough, Han Yunqing almost choked on her own saliva. She wasn't sure if Lady Tianxin had said those words, but she had to admit that they were too far-fetched. If one looked at it from the perspective of Western medicine, all the lesions were really caused by the virus. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for her. Poisons and viruses were two different concepts. She could mostly treat poisons that existed naturally in plants and animals, as well as man-made poisons. Leaving that aside, Emperor Tianhui's words put Han Yunqing in a difficult position. She couldn't deny her mother's words, but she couldn't explain it enough for Emperor Tianhui to understand the subtleties. Han Yunqing thought it over before replying modestly, medicine and poisons are one family. That's the highest realm for both doctors and poisons. Yunxi has only learned the superficial knowledge of mother's skills. No wonder the empress said you were modest. Even your father and Gu Beiyue couldn't treat illnesses, yet you treated them as easily as turning over your hand. If this counts as superficial knowledge, then wouldn't your father and Gu Beiyue be good-for-nothings? Emperor Tianhui asked sternly. To reply, Your Majesty, divine Dr. Han Yunqing and imperial physician Gu know how to treat illnesses, while Yunxi knows how to treat poisons. These are two different matters that can't be compared, Han Yunqing explained as before. Who knew that the emperor was impatient and unhappily said, Qin Wangfei, Zhen summoned you here to treat an illness, not to be modest. Zhen still hopes that you can cure the crown prince with a bowl of medicine. Are you going to keep hiding your skills? Han Yunqing's heart thumped at these words. Heaven knows how the empress had whispered pillow talk to make the emperor believe so strongly in her medical skills. Chapter 52. Faced with Emperor Tianhui's impatience, Han Yunqing knew that any further explanation would only turn into an argument. Did she not want her head anymore? She couldn't help but steal a glance at Long Fei Yi. This guy knew she only knew how to treat poisons, so he should at least speak up for her. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi was still leisurely brewing tea and didn't pay any attention to her side. Han Yunqing's lips curved up in self-mockery. She was overthinking things. How could this guy help her? He probably had nothing better to do, so he came to watch. If she couldn't explain herself, then she wouldn't. Han Yunqing wanted to do her best to treat him. Even if she couldn't, the emperor couldn't kill her, right? Your Majesty, since you've summoned Yunxi to treat his illness, then let Yunxi take a look at His Highness Crown Prince's pulse first, she said seriously. Emperor Tianhui had been waiting for her to say exactly that. Han Yunqing, don't disappoint Zhen. Han Yunqing did her best to bear the pressure and soon arrived at the Eastern Palace with the Emperor and Duke of Qin. As soon as they reached the gates, they saw that the place was heavily guarded. Many people knew that the Crown Prince had contracted a strange illness, but the exact nature of the illness was a huge secret. Han Yunqing only knew that it was a pregnancy pulse. She had no idea what the Crown Prince's current condition was or whether he'd changed over the years. She only knew that the Crown Prince hadn't left the Eastern Palace since his illness began 7 years ago. The Crown Prince had been intelligent since childhood and was the Empress's eldest son. He had a noble status and was doted on by the Emperor. Since he was 3 years old, Emperor Tianhui had spent a lot of effort to cultivate him. But in the end, he'd contracted a strange illness. If it couldn't be cured, Emperor Tianhui would have no choice but to reconsider the heir apparent. Once that happened, not only would it take time and effort, but it would also incite internal strife within the court. The princes would even kill each other. Tianning country was still developing, so internal strife was the last thing Emperor Tianhui wanted to see. Thus, he hadn't given up on the crown prince even after 7 years of illness. Even when the crown prince was confined to bed, he still paid attention to court affairs daily and knew everything like the back of his hand. Walking into the Eastern Palace, Han Yunqing's heart sank when she saw that the security was even tighter than the one outside. She couldn't help but consider a problem. The crown prince wasn't suffering from any other strange illness, but a pregnancy pulse that he was ashamed to speak of. In a way, this was a disgrace to Tianning's imperial clan. It could even be seen as a sign of disaster. Once the emperor finally gave up on the crown prince, would anyone who knew about the crown prince's strange illness still be alive? Han Konggan, Gu Beiyue, and her, who was about to meet the crown prince. Although she was Qin Wangfei, the emperor's attitude just now clearly showed that he didn't treat her as a member of the imperial family. The entire journey was silent. When they arrived at the bedchamber, they saw that the Empress Dowager and the Empress had already arrived. However, Han Konggan and Gu Beiyue did not come. Han Yunqing originally thought that they would also come. It looked like Emperor Tianhui had long decided to let her pick the Great Liang. Through the beaded curtain, she could vaguely see that the bed in the inner room was covered by a gauze curtain. The crown prince should be lying on the bed. At this distance, the detox system would warn her if there was any poison. Han Yunqing didn't hear the warning, but she still held on to a sliver of hope. She'd do a full-body scan when she got closer to be certain. As soon as she saw Han Yunqing enter, the Empress Dowager was very affectionate. She took her hand tightly, her face full of emotion, as if she hadn't been the one to issue the arrest warrant for Hizhe of the North Court. Yunqi, you've really surprised me. I thought that after your mother left, my lucky star had left as well. I never thought that you'd inherit your mother's medical skills. Good, very good. Even the emperor had no effect explaining things, much less this mastermind behind the scenes. Moreover, Han Yunqing didn't believe that they were sincere in wanting her to save the crown prince. They just wanted to toss this hot potato from Han Konggan's hands to her. Then they'd have another excuse to punish her for her crimes. Han Yunqing was too lazy to explain, so she only smiled. I'm not clear on the specifics either. I'll do my best. At this moment, the Empress came forward as well, taking Han Yunqing's other hand as if she was very familiar with her. Yunqi, don't be modest. I won't allow you to fail to cure him. If even you can't cure him, then. As the Empress spoke, she took out a handkerchief to cover her face and began to sob. Seeing this, the Emperor's eyes flashed with impatience. All right. Qin Wangfei, come inside with Zhen. Yes. Han Yunqing nodded. Seeing that the Empress Dowager and Empress had no plans to enter, she assumed that the Long Fei Yi wouldn't enter either. But who knew that this silent fellow actually walked in front of her? He didn't say a single word on her behalf. At this moment, Han Yunqing found this fellow to be a bit of an eyesore. Han Yunqing took a deep breath and strode into the inner rooms. Inside, she could faintly make out the person on the bed. That person was covered with blankets as he lay on his back. His features couldn't be seen clearly, but Han Yunqing knew he was awake. This was Tianning country's crown prince, Long Tianma. Han Yunqing was staring when Long Tianma said, Tianma is unable to get off the bed to pay respects. Imperial father, please forgive me. Imperial Qin uncle, please forgive me. Han Yunqing's heart gave a slight start. She thought that Long Tianma would give up on himself and have a bad temper. She didn't expect him to have such courtesy. Although his voice sounded weak, it didn't have the dispirited air of someone who'd been ill for a long time. 7 years, 7 whole years. After suffering from such a shameful illness, it was excusable if he didn't speak or chased people out. Just how strong was this man's mental fortitude? No wonder Emperor Tianhui thought so highly of him and still hadn't given up on him. As a doctor, the sensitive Han Yunqing immediately smelled his strong will to live. Leaving aside everything else, Han Yunqing admired patients like this. But this fellow had completely ignored her. For better or for worse, she was still his imperial aunt. All right, Han Yunqing admitted that she couldn't admire him. Separated by the gauze curtains, Han Yunqing sat down by the bed and said mildly, "Your hand." After a while, Long Tianma extended his hand without a word. It was obvious that he was unhappy and didn't trust Han Yunqing. Han Yunqing really wanted to tell him that she was even more unhappy than he was, but Han Yunqing abandoned all distracting thoughts after putting her hand on his. She became serious. Following that, Emperor Tianhui and Long Tianma fell silent as well, feeling a little nervous. Only Long Feiyi sat on one side, studying Han Yunqing's small face. It was unclear what he was looking at. Han Yunqing didn't take his pulse immediately, but activated her scanning system to do a deeper examination. Unfortunately, the results disappointed her. She still couldn't find any poison. Gathering her thoughts, she began to take his pulse seriously. Although she was a doctor of poisons, she still knew how to diagnose patients. She just wasn't proficient in it. Taking one's pulse was both the simplest and the most difficult. As soon as she touched Long Tianma's pulse, she had a rough idea of what was going on, but didn't dare to be careless. At first glance, it really did look like a pregnancy pulse. Strictly speaking, a pregnancy pulse wasn't a type of pulse. It was a special case of a slippery pulse that only applied to women. In traditional Chinese medicine, a pregnant woman's pulse was called a pregnancy pulse. If the woman didn't have her period, had no symptoms, and had a slippery pulse, then it was time to consider whether she was pregnant or not. A slippery pulse meant that the pulse was smooth, floating, solid, and smooth. If there was anemia, rheumatism, acute infection, fever, acute or chronic gastroenteritis, cirrhosis, ascites, and other symptoms, a slippery pulse would also appear. Han Yunqing felt a slippery pulse. Judging from the pulse, Long Tianma's body didn't have any symptoms. For a moment, Han Yunqing was at a loss. What kind of pulse should this be? Han Konggan and the medical academy's highly respected directors had all classified this as a pregnancy pulse, but what about her? The ancients didn't understand basic common sense, but she did. How could a man give birth to a child without a vagina or a uterus? Although there were plenty of medical theories in modern times that suggested the miracle of a man giving birth through surgery, those were all theories. Moreover, it still required surgery. What was Long Tianma's pulse? It could only be described as a slippery pulse without any symptoms. Thinking up to here, Han Yunqing released Long Tianma's hand. Seeing this, Emperor Tianhui hastily asked, "How is it? Your Majesty, can you invite Imperial Physician Gu over?" Han Yunqing asked seriously. She'd have to consult Gu Beiyue about this pulse. Hearing Han Yunqing's words, Emperor Tianhui's expression turned ghastly. Gu Beiyue's already taken a look. He can't help it. Just what did you see? Han Yunqing wasn't afraid, but told him the truth. Your Majesty, the Crown Prince's pulse is slippery. For the time being, Yunshi can't confirm the specifics. We need to do a further examination. I need Imperial Physician Gu's help. Isn't it a pregnancy pulse? The Emperor was stunned. Long Feiyi looked over as well, astonished. At this moment, the Empress Dowager and Empress rushed in at the same time. Isn't it a pregnancy pulse? Is it really not? Yunshi, what is it then? Hurry and tell us. Yunshi, I knew you wouldn't disappoint His Majesty. Hurry and tell us what's going on. The Empress Dowager and Empress were both moved. For a second, Han Yunqing almost believed that they were sincere. But it was at this moment that Long Tianma suddenly lifted the covers and pointed at his stomach, mocking, "Qin Wangfei, you said it's not a pregnancy pulse. Then what is it?" Even through the muslin curtains, Han Yunqing could see it clearly. Heavens! Long Tianma's stomach was very, very big. It looked like he'd been pregnant for 7 months. This, Han Yunqing seemed to think of something as her face turned ghastly white. She knew now, things were troublesome. Very troublesome. She can't even read the pulse. Imperial father, Aken refuses to let her treat me. Long Tianma's tone was extremely cold. He was already sick of Han Kangin, so how could he still trust his trash of a daughter? Even if Han Yunqing was Qin Wangfei, even if Imperial Uncle Qin, who he feared the most, was present, he wouldn't be polite. He knew that Imperial Uncle Qin would never take a fancy to this woman. Did you read the wrong pulse? The Empress Dowager was extremely disappointed. I thought there'd be a miracle. Yunqi, so you didn't even see Tianma's stomach. I thought you, say, you can't even read the pulse. How are you going to save him? The Empress sighed. Long Tianma covered himself with the covers again and simply turned his back to them. Seeing this, Emperor Tianhui's eyebrows furrowed. He glared at Han Yunqing and said coldly, fishing for fame. Deceiving the world to gain fame. You, and your father, you too, someone come, take them out and give them 30 floggings. The Empress Dowager and Empress exchanged glances and tacitly smiled coldly. Long Fei Yi remained seated the entire time, coldly staring at Han Yunqing. It was as if this woman wasn't his Wangfei and had nothing to do with him. The Empress Dowager and Empress were waiting for Han Yunqing to beg for mercy. They were waiting to hit her while she was down and pin the crime of deceiving the monarch on her. Unexpectedly, Han Yunqing's eyes flashed with anger. She actually glared angrily at Emperor Tianhui without backing down. She clenched her fists, her petite frame seeming to contain a hidden strength that could explode at any moment. This woman, what does she want to do? Does she know what she's doing right now? Emperor Tianhui widened his eyes in disbelief. This was the first time someone had dared to glare at him like this. Chapter 53. Han Yunqing was infuriated. She understood that the Tao didn't pass on the scriptures, while doctors didn't knock on the door. It was clearly Emperor Tianhui who summoned her to treat him, so why did it sound like she'd come to cheat him? Since when had she been angling for fame? Since when had she gained fame by deceiving the world? Weren't the rumors spread by people with ulterior motives? The 2 eunuchs on the side who were about to step forward were frightened by the sight and didn't dare to move. Seeing this, the Empress Dowager and Empress exchanged looks of disbelief. Wasn't this girl too bold? She dared to be so impudent in front of the emperor? Still, Long Fei Ye's lips drew up into a beautiful curve. In the silence, Han Yunqing spoke up coldly, word for word. Your Majesty, I don't care who diagnosed the pregnancy pulse. I'll say it again, the Crown Prince's pulse is slippery, not pregnant. If you called me here just to verify someone else's diagnosis, then you found the wrong person. Emperor Tianhui was left speechless by her words. A pregnancy pulse was something that had been determined long ago. He'd invited Han Yunqing here so she could treat this illness. That was because Han Kangin had prescribed abortion pills after the Crown Prince's stomach grew bigger. Unfortunately, none of them had any effect. Han Kangin didn't know where to start, so he could only take the Crown Prince's pulse every day and have him drink medicine to nourish his body. Emperor Tianhui couldn't help but worry that the Crown Prince would really give birth to a child one day. Unexpectedly, Han Yunqing's diagnosis wasn't a pregnancy pulse. Seeing that Emperor Tianhui was still angry, Han Yunqing continued, Your Majesty, it's impossible for a man to get pregnant. Yunqi dares to guarantee with my life that His Highness Crown Prince doesn't have a pregnancy pulse. The focus of the illness can only be in His Highness's stomach, which should be a giant sarcoma. That's why it looks like a fetus and has such a slippery pulse. If we don't treat it now, it'll endanger the crown prince's life if the sarcoma continues to grow. Everyone present was stunned by her words. This woman could still say so much with such self-assurance. Han Kangen had treated her for 7 years and was completely sure that it was a pregnancy pulse and that there was a fetus in her belly. Han Yunqing, oh Han Yunqing, how could she say that it was just a lesion in her belly? Long Tianma turned around abruptly. He had to admit that even though he didn't have any hope for Han Yunqing, his eyes couldn't help but light up with hope when he heard the diagnosis. If it wasn't a pregnancy pulse, but a strange disease, a sarcoma like Han Yunqing said, then his whole life could be turned around. One had to know that if it was confirmed to be a pregnancy pulse, even if it was cured, it would be a big stain in his life. Once it was exposed, he would be ridiculed by the world. If it was a malignant tumor, then it would be perfectly normal. He would not spend so much effort to guard against the spying and investigation of the other princes. Looking at the stubborn Han Yunqing, Long Tianma suddenly had an impulse to believe her. Meanwhile, the empress had a complicated expression on her face. Of course she wanted her son to be fine. He was her everything. But she still couldn't completely trust Han Yunqing, much less hope that Han Yunqing would succeed in this matter. Yunshi, but, your father has been taking the crown prince's pulse every day for 7 years. It can't be that he's always been wrong, right? The empress asked worriedly. These words not only reminded Han Yunqing, but Emperor Tianhui and the crown prince as well, thoroughly shattering their hopes. A trifling pulse was easy enough for an ordinary doctor, much less Han Kangen. A complicated look flitted past Han Yunqing's eyes, but her attitude was still firm. It's his fault. Yunshi, why don't you stay here for a few days and observe a bit more? The empress probed. I'm 100% certain that he's mistaken. Han Yunqing's voice wasn't loud, but it was filled with unquestionable authority. Seeing her serious and resolute expression, even the empress wavered. At this moment, Long Tianma spoke up. Imperial father, summon Han Kangen to confront her. Emperor Tianhui hesitated before agreeing. Someone come, summon Han Kangen here. While they waited, the room was silent. Everyone looked at Han Yunqing with doubtful and expectant gazes. As a doctor, Han Yunqing was used to such looks. As if no one else was present, she sat quietly on one side, her mind doing its best to search for similar cases she'd heard of before. The crown prince's illness was indeed very strange, but it did not mean that there was no precedent. In her memory, she had heard of similar cases when she was in school. There were no more than 100 similar cases recorded in the modern medical history of the world. It could be said that it was very rare. She had her suspicions when she took his pulse, but after seeing the crown prince's big belly, she was more or less certain. Sarcoma and whatnot were just excuses. As for what illness it was, she knew she couldn't say it out loud. Once she did, she'd definitely lose her life. Her current problem was how to deny Han Kangen's diagnosis. Soon enough, Han Kangen arrived. He was in his 50s and sported a white goatee. He was dressed in long, gray robes. Although he tried to keep a low profile in the palace, it was difficult to hide the dignity and bearing of a clan head. This was Han Yunqing's first time seeing her father since transmigrating to this world. After Han Kangen entered, he greeted each and every one of them. Even when facing Han Yunqing, he still bowed respectfully and called her Qin Wangfei. Han Yunqing's tone was cold as she said, "Dispense with the formalities." Towards this father of hers, she not only felt unfamiliar, but also hatred. Han Yunqing hated men who were jealous of women the most in her life, but Han Kangen was such a person. Why had Lady Tianxin died in childbirth back then? Why had she been born an ugly girl with the most common poison scars growing up? Why hadn't a doctor from a distinguished medical family treated her? Han Yunqing would find answers to these questions sooner or later. The empress couldn't wait to speak up. Han Kangen, Qin Wangfei has determined that the crown prince's stomach is a malignant tumor. What do you think? Han Kangan originally thought that Han Yunqing would be helpless against such a strange illness, which was why Emperor Tianhui had summoned him. But who knew this was the case? He looked at Han Yunqing in disbelief. This damned girl was too daring. Even if she studied the medical books left behind by her mother, they were only about detoxification techniques. She actually dared to make such a diagnosis. Han Kangan shook his head. Qin Wangfei, do you have proof for the malignant tumor? Then do you have proof for the fetus? Han Yunqing retorted. Han Kangan's lips curved into a mocking smile. The pulse is proof. So is His Highness Crown Prince's stomach. Qin Wangfei, even Cloud Realm Medical Academy's directors have confirmed that this is a pregnancy pulse. It's the pulse that's in dispute. It's not enough proof. Han Yunqing's attitude was unyielding. If not for her status and everyone else present, Han Kangan would have lost his temper long ago. No wonder the Empress Dowager and Grand Concubine Yi's men had been looking for him to investigate. This damned girl had really changed into a different person. If this was the past, she wouldn't have dared to speak to him like this even after she became Qin Wangfei. Then how did you tell it was a malignant tumor? Han Kangan asked. No matter how skilled this damned girl was, her diagnosis couldn't be separated from the pulse. Since she said the pulse wasn't enough proof, he'd like to see what proof she had. Poison. Han Yunqing said confidently. That word alone made everyone suck in a cold breath. It was actually poison. His Highness Crown Prince has been poisoned with a type of poison called tumor poison. It's not fatal, but it stays in the body for a long time and absorbs the foul qi from the organs to form a malignant tumor. Once the tumor grows big enough to press on the major meridians, it'll be life-threatening. This was actually a lie made up by Han Yunqing, but she said it calmly as if it were true. Everyone present was stupefied. They never thought such a strange poison existed in the world, nor that the Crown Prince's strange illness was like this. This had nothing to do with a pregnancy pulse or pregnancy. Compared to a man getting pregnant, Han Yunqing's explanation was much more reasonable and believable. Even the Empress, who wanted to make things difficult for Han Yunqing, revealed a look of pleasant surprise. How she wanted to believe in Han Yunqing right now. Han Kangan gave a start as well. It took him a while to speak. Then do you have proof? Han Yunqing wouldn't foolishly say she could tell from the pulse. Her eyes flashed with self-confidence as she said, I can neutralize the poison and remove the malignant tumor. It's already been 7 years. Can you deliver a child? Han Kangan finally couldn't take it anymore. He took 2 steps back with a look of disbelief. Those who didn't know would think they were competitors when they looked at the father and daughter pair. Esteemed Princess Consort, you can't joke around with the Crown Prince's life. Han Kangan said seriously. Although he wasn't familiar with poisons, he didn't want to believe that the Crown Prince was poisoned. The pulse was clearly a pregnancy pulse and there was clearly a life in the stomach. Even if he was wrong, how could the most authoritative medical school be wrong? Although the directors of the medical school had all left, he had secretly consulted with the directors to discuss this issue over the years. The pregnancy pulse was certain. They needed to discuss how to make the Crown Prince's stomach disappear and how to kill the fetus that shouldn't exist without endangering the Crown Prince's life. Abortion pills had no effect at all and could only be delivered. However, giving birth to a child was dangerous for a woman, let alone a man. To be exact, they still didn't understand how a man could give birth to a child. Cutting the abdomen was something they dared to think about but didn't dare to do. Moreover, if the child was really cut out, his life would be over. The emperor had long believed in the pregnancy pulse, but he still held the hope that it was a misdiagnosis. This princess consort isn't joking around with the Crown Prince's life. On the contrary, you can't even see the poison pulse and dragged it out for 7 years. Do you know that if the poison was cured earlier, the Crown Prince's stomach wouldn't be so big? It's you who wasted 7 years of the Crown Prince's life. Han Yunqing angrily retorted. She admitted that she was taking this opportunity to take revenge. Don't think that she didn't know that Han Kangen had a hand in the young general's matter. Not to mention that she was bullied in her maternal family, just the fact that he sacrificed his daughter to curry favor with the Empress Dowager was enough to make Han Yunqing hate him for a lifetime. Was this kind of person worthy of being her father? You're talking nonsense. Nonsense. Han Kangen was anxious. He didn't care about his status and angrily rebuked. Who knew that Han Yunqing would angrily reprimand bold Han Kangen? Is this the attitude you should have when speaking to this princess consort? What's the punishment for offending one's superiors? Her words surprised everyone present. Nobody expected Han Yunqing, the unfavored Qin Wangfei, to put on the airs of a Wangfei in front of Han Kangen. This woman, isn't she a little too interesting? The curve of Long Fei Ye's lips grew more and more beautiful, while Emperor Tianhui began to stroke his chin in amusement. Han Kangen was dumbstruck as he shook his head in disbelief. He couldn't speak for a long time. Han Yunqing loftily looked at him disdainfully. Whether I'm talking nonsense or not, we'll know once the malignant tumor is taken out. So speaking, she turned towards Emperor Tianhui. Your Majesty, I've already told you the results of my diagnosis. Whether or not he'll be treated is up to your Majesty to decide. Chapter 54. To treat or not to treat? Qin Wangfei, you mean to say that you have a way to treat the crown prince? Emperor Tianhui asked seriously. A case like the crown prince's could be diagnosed with an ultrasound in modern times. Then, an open abdominal surgery would be carried out immediately. It was just a surgery similar to a caesarean section. However, in ancient times, it was a little difficult to perform such a surgery. Even so, Han Yunqing still nodded without hesitation. Naturally, she had other methods. How do you treat him? Long Tianma asked urgently. His words immediately exposed his trust in Han Yunqing. I'll make an antidote for the tumor poison and dissolve the giant tumor into poisonous blood. Then I'll cut open the abdomen and do my best to use acupuncture techniques to expel the poison, Han Yunqing replied truthfully. If she cut open the crown prince's stomach to take out the thing, it'd be an extremely deep incision. Without any suturing tools, she wouldn't take the risk. But if she used medicine to dissolve the thing in the crown prince's stomach into blood and then opened his mouth to expel the poison, then it'd be a small operation similar to the one she'd performed on young General Mu Qingguo. As long as she didn't lose too much blood, then the risks of this plan were completely within her control. As soon as she finished speaking, Han Kangen spoke up. Then you still can't prove that the crown prince's stomach is a malignant tumor. If the tumor turns into blood, Divine Dr. Han can take the blood to see if there's any poison. Han Yunqing's lips curved into a mocking smile as she deliberately emphasized the words Divine Dr. Han. Han Kangen's face alternated between red and white. He hated her to the core, but couldn't speak. You'll have to cut open the abdomen, the Empress hesitated. This isn't appropriate. The Empress Dowager hesitated as well, her face full of worry. This was genuine worry, since the Crown Prince was her most beloved eldest grandson. When Qinxia treated the young general's poison, I cut open the abdomen as well. Because of this, the Empress Dowager misunderstood. Esteemed Empress Dowager, if you still don't believe Qinxia, you can summon the young general to take a look. The wound on his abdomen should still have a scar. Han Yunqing's tone was very calm. Anger flashed through the Empress Dowager's eyes. This damned girl, she's still thinking about that. She's clearly mocking me. The Empress Dowager fell silent. Once the success story was out in the open, Han Yunqing tossed the hot potato to Emperor Tianhui and put him in charge of the situation. Your Majesty, Yunqi has already explained everything clearly. It's up to you whether to treat him or not. Emperor Tianhui and Long Tianma stared at each other through the muslin curtains, neither of them speaking. Han Yunqing was smart enough to come up with a diagnosis completely different from Han Kangen's. If Emperor Tianhui believed her, then he'd let her treat him. If he didn't, then there was no reason to make things difficult for her. Under such circumstances, Han Kangan didn't dare to speak too much. After all, he hadn't been able to come up with a treatment plan for so many years. If he continued to speak, he would be courting death. For a moment, the room fell silent. Unexpectedly, Emperor Tianhui slowly turned to face Long Feiyi. Duke of Qin, what do you think? Han Yunqing was surprised that Emperor Tianhui would ask about Long Feiyi. Still, Long Feiyi didn't panic, as if he'd long expected the question. His expression was indifferent and inscrutable. This matter is of great importance. Imperial brother can make the decision. His words left the initiative in Emperor Tianhui's hands. Of course, Emperor Tianhui wasn't easy to deal with. He continued to ask, does the Duke of Qin believe Qin Wangfei? Her question forced Long Fei to give a direct answer. Han Yunqing was puzzled, feeling that something wasn't right. Rumors said that Emperor Tianhui and the Duke of Qin were close brothers. The Duke of Qin held great power, so Emperor Tianhui had to yield to him. But judging from the current situation, the relationship between Emperor Tianhui and the Duke of Qin wasn't close at all. In fact, it was very subtle. If Long Feiyi said he believed Emperor Tianhui's words, then wouldn't he be guilty if Han Yunqing made a mistake? If Long Feiyi said he didn't believe her, then Han Yunqing would be finished. Now everyone was looking at Long Feiyi. Long Feiyi had personally gone to General Mu's estate to save Han Yunqing. Would he still open his mouth this time? Why did he go to General Mu's estate to teach Changping and the Justice Court official a lesson and rescue Han Yunqing from her predicament? Why did he allow the existence of the red handkerchief? Did he and Han Yunqing really have sex as husband and wife? Was it because Han Yunqing wasn't ugly anymore and had medical skills that he saw Han Yunqing in a different light and acknowledged her as his official consort? There were plenty of people here who were curious about these questions. Everyone was waiting for Long Feiyi's answer, but he only said, "It's useless for your lordship to believe her. Only His Majesty and the Crown Prince will believe her." His simple words were enough to deal with 1,000 caddies with 4 tails and dissolve Emperor Tianhui's trap. Han Yunqing almost laughed out loud. This guy really was a crafty old fox. Emperor Tianhui pursed his lips and was about to ask more questions when Long Feiyi said, "Imperial brother, the Crown Prince isn't young anymore. It's time for him to be independent." Without a doubt, these words meant that the Crown Prince should make his own decisions. The Duke of Qin's support was crucial to every imperial son. Naturally, the emperor wanted him to support the Crown Prince. Emperor Tianhui put on a false smile as he looked towards the Crown Prince. "Tianma, your imperial uncle's lecturing is right. Make your own decisions." It had been 7 years. Long Tianma had truly had enough. Even if he still didn't trust Han Yunqing in the depths of his heart, he'd rather take a gamble than wait for death. He knew better than anyone else that if this illness dragged on, his imperial father would definitely give up on him. In the silence, Long Tianma's voice was especially clear. "I'll accept treatment." Han Yunqing exhaled in relief, while Han Kangan's entire face turned black on the side. Without a doubt, the Crown Prince's reaction had thoroughly rejected him. Emperor Tianhui was very satisfied with the Crown Prince's courageous decision. He nodded and said, "Qin Wangfei, can we begin immediately? I need to do a detailed examination to determine the location and size of the sarcoma before I can prescribe the medicine," Han Yunqing said seriously. Once she decided on treatment, her entire body was filled with energy. She immediately went to do a detailed examination. Very soon, she discovered that the thing in Long Tianma's stomach was even bigger than she'd imagined. Moreover, it really did have a life of its own. She pressed a few acupuncture points and found that the thing could move. Her eyes flickered between light and darkness, filled with complicated emotions. "How is it?" Long Tianma asked anxiously. Han Yunqing smiled. "Don't worry. You just need to rest well for the next 2 days. Don't think about anything else. So speaking, she withdrew from the room. The Empress and Empress Dowager surrounded her as well. How is it? Can you treat it right away? What kind of medicine do you need? Just tell me. The prescription is a bit complicated. I'll have to think it over carefully before I can be sure, Han Yunqing said seriously. At this moment, Han Kanggen hastily volunteered himself. Qin Wangfei, this old man isn't talented, but I'm familiar with medicine. I'm willing to assist you. If Han Yunqing couldn't treat it, the Han family would be hard-pressed to escape calamity. If she did, he'd be able to bask in the glory if he helped her. Of course, more importantly, he wanted to see where this damned girl got her confidence from and how she was going to treat him. But Han Yunqing only pretended not to hear him and said, Your Majesty, I want to invite Imperial Physician Gu Beiyue to assist me. Compared to Han Kanggen, Emperor Tianhui naturally trusted Gu Beiyue more. He immediately agreed. Someone come, summon Gu Beiyue here. Han Yunqing stopped him. Your Majesty, this isn't a small matter. I'll go to the Imperial Physician courtyard to discuss the details with Imperial Physician Gu. I'll write out a prescription before sunset. There were a lot of people here, so Emperor Tianhui nodded and ordered someone to bring Han Yunqing over. Han Kanggen looked on with wide eyes, but the Empress Dowager spoke up cold. Divine Dr. Han, I think you should go back and wait for your daughter's good news. Esteemed Empress Dowager, this commoner has served His Highness for 7 years and understands his condition best. Why don't you let this commoner stay, just in case? Before Han Kanggen could finish, the Empress lost her temper. Pa. Han Kanggen, what kind of unlucky things are you saying? Useless thing, you still have the face to stand here. Let me tell you, you were the one who brought out the pregnancy pulse. Once the Crown Prince recovers, I'll deal with you properly. Han Kanggen was too scared to speak, but quickly asked to be excused and fled. Looking at Han Kanggen's wretched figure, the Empress's eyes grew dark. She thought, if Han Yunqing can cure Tianma this time, then I'll temporarily forget about Changping's debt. I'll just treat it as her meritorious service atoning for her crimes. But if she couldn't cure him, she'd definitely uproot the Han family and make this medical family disappear from Cloud Realm continent forever. She'd make Han Yunqing a criminal who exterminated her family. The Empress Dowager and Empress didn't leave, but stood guard by Long Tianma's bedside. Emperor Tianhui didn't seem to want to leave either, his expression grave. It had to be said that they were all nervous. This was the Crown Prince's last chance. If Han Yunqing couldn't save him, then Emperor Tianhui could only reluctantly give him up. But the result was in Han Yunqing's hands. No one could predict it. Long Fei Yi seemed to be the most indifferent one. He rose to walk over and said, Imperial brother, let's go. Chindi will accompany you to drink tea. Emperor Tianhui recovered his wits and nodded before following Long Fei Yi out the door. It's easy to rule a country, but difficult to rule a family, Emperor Tianhui sighed with emotion. Heaven helps the worthy, the Crown Prince. Imperial brother, don't worry, Long Fei Yi said mildly. Emperor Tianhui had tried to sound him out more than once, but couldn't figure out his attitude. Every time, he could only give up. As he grew older, neither the Crown Prince nor any of the other imperial sons were a match for the Duke of Qin. Actually, if the Empress Dowager hadn't schemed against Grand Concubine Yi in the past, he wouldn't have been able to take the throne in the first place. Northern Li was Tianning's enemy, but in Emperor Tianhui's eyes, his younger brother, who was about the same age as him, was even more terrifying than Northern Li's ferocious army. How's the investigation of the Northern Li spies going? Emperor Tianhui asked. There's still a big fish lurking in the shadows. Chindi's already cast the net, Long Fei Yi replied honestly. You have to know that these spies wouldn't have been able to stir up such a storm without a mole, Emperor Tianhui reminded him cold. Chindi understands. Imperial brother can be at ease. Long Fei Yi was neither flustered nor anxious, so calm that it made others feel cold. The two of them chatted as they walked into the Imperial Gardens. At the same time, Han Yunqing had just arrived at the Imperial Physician Courtyard. Gu Beiyue was the head of the Imperial Physician Courtyard, which naturally fell under his sphere of influence. As soon as he heard that Han Yunqing had come because of the Crown Prince, he immediately dismissed all of the medical attendants in his study and ordered them to stand guard outside the door. No one was allowed to approach. Han Yunqing hadn't even said a word, but she couldn't help but silently admire Gu Beiyue's strength despite his frail appearance. If Long Fei Yi was an icy fox, then this man was a gentle one. He personally closed the door behind him and walked over with a faint smile. Qin Wangfei, has the diagnosis been made? If it was anyone else in his place, they'd definitely be nervous. But Gu Beiyue was always so calm. Han Yunqing especially liked to see his warm smile, because it could calm her down in an instant. But every time, she was the one who broke the calm in his eyes. It's not a pregnancy pulse, she said with a smile. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.